How are you, buddy?
Good. It's summer, another year. Looking forward to vacation.
You say summer another year, but you live in summer permanently, man.
That is true. Our coldest weather is maybe what is it in Fahrenheit is maybe 50 degrees and a little bit of rain.
Man.
10 days of rain, maybe.
Yeah, that's not okay. I mean, here it's been the most dreadful summer you can believe. And I'm not talking only the UK, most of Europe.
I know Europe. I've been looking. They've had rain in Sweden and everything.
Yeah,
By the way, my travel plans aren't 100% set, but yesterday I found some award seats in your honor on Finnair.
Ah, that's nice. I hope you get the new business class from Finnair then.
Yeah, it's the new 350.
Fantastic. Yeah, because I was looking for some reason just earlier at the weather and the... Currently, it's very cold in all the Nordics. Besides, for some reason, the Baltics. So Lithuania was like
Estonia.
Like it's like almost as hot as Greece. It makes no sense, man.
Oh my God, strange.
Yes, our friends of mine that are on the beach there. I'm like, how? Here it's been raining in the UK. I mean, now it's been actually okay the past weekend. Tomorrow starts the actual summer. So do you watch football at all? Soccer, as you call it.
Yeah, I've been watching the games. Both Copa America and the Euro.
The Copa America was a bit late for us, right? The final was at 1 a.m. in the UK, so I didn't watch it. I saw the highlights on the following day. But we've been robbed. Here, I'm not going to put my Greek hat on. I'm going to put my Swiss hat on. We've been robbed an opportunity to meet each other because, it could have been Switzerland-Turkey. And of course, the Netherlands and England went ahead. So, yeah, I mean, when England was playing Switzerland, I think Swiss made a quick ad. I think it was just on Instagram and maybe on Facebook. They said, Rushdie is better than fish and chips. That didn't help us.
The Swiss are really, really good, though,
But the Turks, man, I was rooting for the Turks. And, because he was an explosive type of football, the type of football I like attacking football, not the defensive one that England. And by the way, I want to put that out there because that's probably going to stay in the recording. I've been supporting England way before I moved to this country. I always loved England. Now they're much better, but this year was not. No. And the best team won in the end. Spain won, so by far the best. So I'm happy.
Very, very strong. Yeah, it was a good game though.
Yeah, good game. I was in a pub, obviously, shouting, and for that game, although my heart balanced. Because I love Spain. For that game, I was obviously for England just because I wanted to see, the pub explode, which it did when the equalizer came in, but that died out a few minutes later. So,
yeah, the second half wasn't that pretty.
Yeah.
I just want to tell you both good luck. We're all counting on you.
We don't need good luck, although, again, it would have been nice to meet in this Euro. Maybe the World Cup, man. Maybe the World Cup. Hakan,
Inshallah.
Inshallah, exactly. Hakan, welcome back. Although you need no introduction, I will let you a little bit later introduce yourself. I'm going to do some housekeeping first. For those who don't know Hakan, he was already featured in episode 124, LAX, because that's obviously where you live, in January 2023. So it's a long time ago. So lots to catch up about here. Also, shout out to Kim, because you told us after we recorded that episode back then that your almost neighbor was listening to us, so shout out to her again. I know she's listening because she likes our posts on my posts on Instagram and stuff. So thank you, Kim. I want to do a quick shout out, although it's not recorded. You see, I'm sporting a weird shirt today, which is the. Do you follow cricket at all?
Not here in the U.S., no. I haven't quite figured it out yet.
That's the same with me. I haven't fully figured out cricket yet. Though there was the T20, it's a quicker, faster version of cricket. The championships, the World Championship just happened in India. Congrats, India. Won. And this t-shirt is from India, but it's not the Indian team. It's one of the Indian teams of the IPL called the Rajasthan Royals. And I wanted to give them a shout out because I gave them a workshop, a masterclass last week. We're recording this on July the 16th. I don't have my glasses today. And they finished actually third, this team RR this year. And so I gave them a a masterclass on podcasting, actually, believe it or not. It was a fun thing to do with them. So I want to give them a shout out because I know that all throughout I was giving this masterclass, some of them were like looking, which podcast is Paul on? So I'm sure they'll be listening in. So hello, Jake, the CEO, Adarsh, you took great care of me and also, made sure I had the right size for this jersey. And all of you made me have such a great day. And shout out to especially Rajendra, who is the head of marketing. Man, you are a star. You should do podcasting. You should be a host for any podcast you want, whether it's cricket, marketing. I don't know what you like, but you're the best. Anyway, on that, let's play the intro music. Yeah. So yes, more housekeeping. Pardon the delay in getting back to recording this. It's been like 6-7 weeks, I don't know. Alex said, yeah, let's record one, and then didn't because he was probably very busy, and also I had a very tough month actually the last month. So I was also actually very busy as well. So that didn't happen, and then I let it go, and then Alex left for these summer holidays. Which he will explain when he comes back, obviously, on this podcast. So we're not going to talk in this episode about my past travels because it's all going to be about Hakan and the state of industry. I mean, as Hakan has already been a guest on the show, obviously, I'm not going to ask him the usual, your favorite trip, your favorite memory, because we've done that. But we have a lot of stuff to cover that we discussed about before recording this. I had just one thing. I had a lot of questions after the end of the last episode, which was very, very successful. Thank you guys for having tuned in. Vinod, you're a star. A lot of questions about me going to D-Day. So no, I didn't see Macron being late. I didn't see Sunak leaving way too early, and I didn't see Biden being lost. I was not at the official things of the D-Day. I was on June 6th. Actually, I did a walk with the Royal Marines Commando, so the Royal Unit from the UK, Commando 47. They're the same commando who actually landed on the beach 80 years ago. And we did the exact same route that their forefathers did to liberate France. It took like a full day. Of course, we didn't have a foreign army trying to block us, obviously, when we were doing this. It was just a walk, but it was great. It was really... So I didn't... Yeah, to be clear, I was not on the, on the ship that landed. We started a walk once we were on the beach, and I was not like one of the guys who actually jumped, because they did a kind of reenactment of that as well, which was very emotional, very, very nice. And talking about aviation, do you do air shows at all? Do you go to see air shows at all, Hakan?
Yeah, we have some local ones, some primarily military ones. So
there was a big one, of course. Again, 80th anniversary of the D-Day. There was 150,000 people on the cliffs. Yeah, it was a lot of people, man. We actually didn't take a car. Of course, walking was too long. So I hadn't taken a bike for so long because living in London, you don't want a bike or you're dead. We rode like kilometers and kilometers, like more than 30. And we were, on the edge of the cliffs. And of course, the show was happening just in front of us above the sea. There were P-47 Spitfires, DC-3s, but also the A400M, that military aircraft from Airbus, F-16s, Rafale Marines, etc., etc. And there was the Patrouille de France, from the military, the French military. Man, those guys, that was really amazing. And do you have a favorite aerobatic display team? I guess you could say maybe the Americans or the Turks, but I don't know.
Well, here in the U.S., I've been fortunate enough to see the Blue Angels, the U.S. Navy Blue Angels. So I've seen them, I think, probably 3 times now in 20, 30 years. So
wow,
that's been something. And I've been wanting to catch a show by the Thunderbirds, but have never made it.
Yeah, I've seen the Blue Angels as well. I've never seen the Thunderbirds. It's really funny because it's one of these questions, not the one I just asked, but if you ask somebody who's your favorite, it's so emotional and so biased because people are from their country. They will say it's impossible to have an answer to that one. But yeah, the Patrouille de France is, I'm going to run into cliches now, but it's like very elegant. They cross in front of you with such beauty. It's really nice. The Blue Angels, I've not seen the Thunderbirds, but I could assume could be similar, are very bombastic. It's grand, it's boom, like it's in your face, and I love it. It's very American,
very,
right?
Very macho, yes.
Yeah. The Red Arrows, in the UK. I know that Ed Parsons, one of our very loyal listener, who was also on the podcast twice, actually, he follows them. And they're very brave, yet very reserved. And I don't want to say that in a negative way. It's very British. It's stunning. The Patrouille de Suisse, the Swiss guys, are very precise, of course, like watchmakers, right? You feel like it's a single wing flying. And I've actually seen once Turkish stars, this is rock star level, right? It's also very, very cool. And there's so many others. My favorite ones, and it is not from either country either I live in or I'm from, is the Italians, the Frecce Tricolori. These guys are lunatics because they're just all over the place in a good way. I mean, they had accidents in the past, by the way, but this is why I find them so incredible. So this is my favorite.
Actually, I believe they're on tour right now in the United States. They were somewhere here in California in the last I believe a few weeks. Yes.
Oh, wow. Oh, man. See, I've seen them only once, and I will always remember that. I mean, Patrouille de France that I just saw was honestly one of the best I've seen, but I've yet to see like one that goes as crazy as the Italians. Anyway, this show is about what Hakan thinks. So you're a consummate professional in the aviation industry. Maybe for those who don't remember you, or of course for new listeners, we keep having them. Can you reintroduce yourself so that people know who you are?
Yep, I'm named Hakan, LA Flyer on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it these days. I've been in the industry for 30, maybe 34, 35 years, getting older and older by the day.
You're not.
Done a bunch of stuff, including the fun stuff, the ground handling that you guys talked about on the last episode of Vinod. I've gone through some of those same stories, and actually I've handled some of those same airlines that they mentioned, for instance, Air Berlin.
No way!
We used to handle them here at LAX back in the day. It was early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. So I've done ground handling. I've done cargo, airline customer service at Virgin Atlantic, duty manager over there. Cargo flight operations, Atlas Air, been a dispatcher, manager of flight operations. And over time, I've kind of migrated into the consulting world, primarily these days focusing on operational efficiency and technology projects for airlines. And I'm a subject matter expert for a couple of vendors. So lucky enough, it's been allowed me to travel around the world and meet people. The travel hasn't been as frequent as it was pre-pandemic, but maybe that's a topic we can cover later on.
Yes.
So now these days it's a lot more virtual, but actually it's really interesting because it keeps my fingers in the industry with so many different airlines. And even though we all try to do the same thing, and every airline's goal is to move an airplane from point A to point B and satisfy their customers, they come at it in very different ways. Even the technology is the same, but you get to see the different cultures and the different manners that companies operate from inside, which I think is really interesting for me.
You know what? Let's actually, you just mentioned it, so let's start with that, because we already said it last time when we met. When we met on the podcast a year and a half ago, that we were both, and many people actually listening actually reacted to that. They were doing the same, traveling less. Of course, it was just post-COVID. Now we're a bit further down the line. Is it still the same to you? Do you feel, besides your own experience, you also see that happening around you with other people that work in the industry, or maybe that used to travel, maybe friends of yours, not aviation industry, that also keep traveling less than they used to?
I do see it less. I mean, in my own particular case, it was a dramatic drop. I used to do probably 1 or 2 long-haul trips a month. So
Same.
I used to rack up maybe 200,000 miles on an annual basis.
Same.
And since the pandemic, last year I did about maybe 70,000 miles. This year I don't think I'll do much more than that.
Same.
I mean, I'm still able to maintain some elite levels because a lot of these programs have gone into the amount of money you spend versus the amount you fly.
Yeah.
So a lot of these tickets I end up flying on are expensive tickets, so I still maintain some elite levels. But yes, I've seen a change. Definitely more and more customers, they rather have a lot of initial meetings that you would have gone to. Now they rather do it virtually. Some follow-up stuff is done virtually. Besides myself, I also see my friends. I mean, we're in different industries. They're also traveling a little bit less. And we're setting records at the airport of number of passengers flying, but it seems to have definitely skewed a little bit more towards leisure travelers.
Yeah.
So the corporate types, we're out there, but we're not there as much.
And do you think I mean, I know the only crystal ball on this podcast is my head because I'm bald, but do you think this is a trend that is, I'm talking here just about corporate travel and traveling. I mean, obviously the state of the economy also matters. It's not the best economy ever anywhere in the world, actually, so that doesn't help. So do you think it's going to last for a bit? I'm not here talking about the economy. I'm talking about corporate travel because nobody knows about the economy. Or maybe actually if and when the economy improves, do you think we'll go back to the heydays of 2018 and people will be traveling like mad?
I don't know if it's necessarily going to go back. I think one thing that's happened is probably during the pandemic, a lot of CFOs saw like, heck, my travel budget went down, 90% or 80%. So I think it's going to be a little hard to wrestle the travel budgets back. Also with airfares going up, that I think I've had some clients that, we travel and they might set aside X amount of thousands of dollars for the trip, and that might not cover it anymore. And they still have the mindset of, well, this is how airfares were 5 years ago, but they're not that anymore. So cost of hotels are up, ground transportation is up, a lot of things are up. So ultimately, I don't know, I just think as much as we want to travel as humans and it's fun to get out there, there's just there's this yin and the yang battle of between technology. Can it be done some other way? Do we have to go? I'm sure for a lot of important big deals, yes, you travel on site, but I think a lot of bookkeeping or just admin stuff we used to do that I've had trips to Asia where literally it was more meet and greet customers, just shake their hands, follow up how they're doing, and I do maybe 4 cities in 1 week and wouldn't spend more than a day in each city. A lot of those meetings can really be done virtually now.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I've brought it up with you before, but I know a regional manager for a software vendor who used to basically spend 2 weeks a month traveling, visiting all of his accounts. He just doesn't do that anymore. Now he's able to talk to every single one of his accounts almost on a weekly basis online. And his opinion that he shared with me feels that communication is actually better now with his customers. So instead of them maybe waiting two or 3 months till he can get out to each one of them, now he's able to see each one of them every single week almost. And there's more open flow of discussions. And if there's issues maybe simmering, they're not waiting for him to show up, 2 months later and to drop the ball on him, say, hey, this happened or that happened. They're able to, proactively discuss it almost on a weekly basis. So I don't know. It's travel will grow. I mean, there's no doubt air travel will grow, but I don't know if corporate travel is going to be as big of a percentage as it used to be. And obviously, a lot of airlines have built business models around the front of the cabin. So I think now they're having to figure out, do we keep those big cabins or do we shift our focus? Do we change marketing a little bit? Do we go for, there's this big trend of leisure travelers buying the premium cabins. So
that's exactly where I was about to go. First of all, like you just travel also 4 cities in Asia in less than a week. I mean, these type of travels, you do it very often in 2017, 18, 19 especially, and that's gone. Which, at the same time, maybe I got older, I'm happy not to travel as much, etc. So similar. And people around me, similarly, in different industries, not in aviation, but different industries, collateral to mine, say the same. So now, the big trend, and I've seen it traveling in the past few years, actually, more and more on the front of the cabin is occupied by leisure travel. So there was at some point, obviously, just post-pandemic, just when we got out of this crap, pardon me, there were maybe like some revenge travel. I never liked that term, but I got it. People were stuck, maybe not at home, but at least couldn't travel internationally as much as they had wanted to because, borders were closing, etc. And they had maybe, they put some money aside, etc. I'm not talking about everybody. Some people lost their living out of this COVID crisis. So I'm not here saying everybody could. But you saw, and I saw, a lot of suddenly leisure travels appearing in the front. And it seems to be a trend that it keeps going to the point that airlines are actually working towards that now. I mean, you just mentioned the fact that airlines have to figure out how to switch slightly their business model, not only for, who do you attract, but also like the decisions about the kind of seats, the kind of experience you want to offer. Because the thing you and me maybe, and people listening to the podcast, we love traveling. So we tend to enjoy the full width of the travel. We'll go to the lounge a bit early and enjoy a drink or maybe a meal. I don't do meals, but you know what? We take our time, we enjoy the cabin, the seat, etc. But corporate travelers usually, maybe it's an overstatement, but actually, their fare is paid by their company, so they don't really care about how much is actually fair. Whereas you and me, we're consultants, so we are more price sensitive than the big corporates. But they tend to, they show up, they go to the seat, it's an everyday thing for them, they go to sleep, so they don't tend to be asking as much. Yes, they will be very stringent about, oh, there's no more champagne, they might not be happy, but a leisure traveler wants to enjoy the entire experience. So certainly airlines not only have to think about how they attract them and maybe how they cater to them, but also like, oh, maybe we need to make sure that this fuller range of experience, like somebody like Emirates would do, is guaranteed, because these guys, spend a lot of money for just leisure. So no corporate is paying for it. It's themselves. So certainly, maybe also the approach of the passenger is a bit different. What do you think? Do you agree?
No, I agree. And also, we've seen it in route selections. We've had some airlines, for instance, here, United Airlines, they started service to some high-end leisure markets like Tahiti, for instance, out of San Francisco.
See. Yeah.
That's not definitely a corporate business market, but they assigned the 787 on that route, to capture those premium leisure travelers. So that's, Bora Bora and Tahiti, those are, once in a lifetime trips for a lot of folks. And, that's what they're marketing and trying to sell. So yes, definitely there is, a shift in how airlines are marketing. It's going to be interesting. Can this play out? Because there's always this, looming thing. Is there a recession around the corner in the U.S.? Or, recently I saw, I think consumer debt is at record highs here in the U.S. So, I mean, is the consumer going to be tapped out at some point and not be able to splurge, or is this just going to continue? So.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I agree. I mean, currently the trend is continued. I've been part of a few conference calls where some, airline bosses, or at least management, maybe not the CEOs, were telling me, they think it's permanent, but how permanent is not how permanent, but how big of the segment will it cater for? It's really hard to say. Some people always will have cash and will like it splurge, and then it's this in between. What will happen? However, that also explains. It's a bit of a stupid remark, but it probably also explains why lounges sometimes feel fuller. It's not only because too many people have status, but since a lot of people come earlier to the airport to enjoy the lounge experience, of course, suddenly, lounges seems fuller because maybe more people tend to stay more than just like 30 minutes before a flight. They will stay for a couple of hours. And then lounges also have to rethink. I know the BA, maybe not the most premium airline in the world anymore, but BA is revamping their lounges at Heathrow, and they've seen actually that people are spending longer times in the lounge. So part of their revamp will also work around that new fact for them.
Now, on that note, actually, I've noticed, lounges used to be, a lot of single travelers, corporate types, business types in the past. Now you're seeing increasing number of couples in them. You're seeing families in them. And I've actually, there's a private lounge operator that I know who's been talking about developing kid zones in some of their lounges, because they realize they've also seen the trend that more and more families are coming visiting their lounges. So they're, when it comes time to remodeling or changing or building out new ones, can we create like a kid zone in there for a little kid section?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's being noticed, and I think companies are putting in the investment. So the clientele is shifting in the premium cabins.
I mean, we'll talk about the Middle Eastern carriers a bit later in the show, but they had kid zones for a long time, actually, but also because they have these huge lounges with invested space for them. Yeah. And a few other in the Nordics as well, always being very kid-friendly. But yeah, the rest of Europe, I mean, forget it. There's no kids areas at all. So yeah, it could be something that maybe some corporate travelers will enjoy because, the kids will be a bit away so I can actually listen to. Even though nowadays everybody seems to be listening to their phone wwithout headphones, which drives me crazy, man. Even in lounges.
And I know sometimes you hear conference calls on speakerphones. So
yes.
Like, come on.
I'm like, what? I just don't get it. Maybe I'm getting too old for this. One trend I just mentioned, because we started with this about having kids and having no kids. I've only seen some report for Europe, so I cannot tell if that's the case globally. But the off-season travel that I was always doing, as in because I have no kids, so I would try to go on holidays, not even September, even sometimes October, especially south of Europe or other places, it's happening more and more. Not only people are looking for deals, as in sometimes, of course, travel is less expensive, occupancy is less, but also people are revamping the ways of thinking their travels, again, maybe because of the push of leisure travel in premium. So they say, if I can actually get a premium cabin by traveling a bit later in the year or earlier before school holidays, doing it. So that's something that seems to be happening in Europe. Again, is it permanent? Hard to say. I can only say that I've been a precursor because I've done that already. No, I'm kidding. But one thing that you said that is very interesting, you said that obviously these type of decisions, airlines and airports as well have to start thinking about how to adapt to the shift. But some of the lead times are very long. For instance, if an airline wants to think about a cabin or the type of aircraft they're onboarding or they will order simply, this is something that not only they have to think ahead, but then they have to live with it for a decade or more, right?
Absolutely. I mean, airlines, one of the things that for, designing cabins, they got to look at every square foot of that airplane or every square meter. And what's the best revenue mix? Is it going to be premium cabins? Is it going to be premium economy? Premium economy, as you know, has been a very, very hot commodity for the last decade almost. And or is it regular economy? So, airlines, when they figure out cabin configurations, that's a long lead time, as you said, just to order the seats. I mean, it's 2-3 year backlog and then retrofitting. And then whatever you do, you're kind of stuck with that for the next decade. So these are big, big decisions. And, you're definitely taking a risk. And looking across the profile, you got airlines, British Airways, you got these big global airlines. It's probably very hard to segment out what your typical passenger is. So they end up having, sub-fleet types, some, premium heavy cabins, some more leisure heavy cabins, and just trying to, figure out, do I need 50 airplanes like this and 20 like that? And it's a complex thing. And obviously that drives right to the bottom line. If you make a poor decision, you're going to be living with that for a long time. Though if you make the right one, it could pay off very, very handsomely. So
on the other end of the spectrum, not the full spectrum, but on the manufacturer side, so here I'm just talking about basically the two big ones, Airbus and Boeing. There's not really like a new plane in the works. So when we think of, of course, the 777 is coming up, the new 777X, but that's been, it's 5 years late already, to the very dire disappointment of Tim Clark from Emirates. I always quote Tim Clark because I think he's a visionary. It's always very interesting to listen to him. So it's not because I worship Emirates or something, because I know some of our listeners think I do, but I don't. But it seems there's nothing really coming up from either side, actually. So, they have great sellers right now. Of course, the economy doesn't have, but don't you think at some point they will have to think about it? Because we're talking about here, 15, 20 years down the line, who's creating the aircraft of the future? And I'm not even talking here about environmental concerns. I'm just talking about there's no aircraft in the pipeline, which is rare. Usually there's always like something in the pipeline.
No, absolutely. There needs to be, I'm sure there somebody somewhere in some back office is thinking about those future clean sheet designs. I know here in the United States, NASA has a couple programs out there, and Boeing is participating in one of new aircraft designs. And I know in Europe, Airbus, they're thinking about different fuel technologies also, and hydrogen. And so, but at some point they have to start thinking about or announcing, coming out with a new design, because you're talking about, 10, 15 year lead times you're talking about at least. So.
Yeah, Comac probably, people don't like to talk about the Chinese, but I do. Comac is probably are building already the next generation aircraft, maybe not on hydrogen one, when I say because they need to expand the offering that they do. And otherwise, there's expansions. Like I think the Airbus is probably the A220, the 500 version is probably coming up. But again, this is just an extension of a current product. It's not like a new product coming up. Tim Clark, since I just mentioned him, actually said in an IATA interview, I don't know if you've seen that, he said that he would love the 380 to come back. He keeps saying that. But he also said he needs the next generation 380. He wants a 1,500 seater aircraft.
Oh, my. A lot of these aircraft, though, are driven by, engine technology, too. So it's not just the aircraft OEMs. You got to make sure that there's an engine provider out there that's, designing for the next generation. And right now, they're struggling with the GTF engines and these on the NEOs. And so let them first figure those out before they move on to the next one. But definitely, a lot of aircraft designs are driven by engines, too. So, but that'd be crazy for a 1,500-seater.
Yes, man.
That's a flying cruise ship.
It's a flying cruise ship. And again, it was on a IATA interview. It was not something fully random in like a small newspaper. I was like, really? Did he actually say that? Probably. And, with Emirates, they would probably fit it from London to Dubai will be full. And then you will have to think about redoing runways probably or something. I would say, however, the head of Airbus Civil Aircraft Division, I forgot his name, Christian something, told in a German newspaper like a couple of weeks ago maybe that for the A380 program, the door is closed, but it is not locked. But in industry, nothing is ever ruled out. Of course, it's very, 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 very thin, but still, he's not ruling it out, which I found pretty interesting, actually.
No, it was an interesting comment. So it makes me wonder, is there somebody behind the scenes? Are they looking at, can we redo this with new engines or change of the wing, or can we do a stretch? I've always thought, when the A380 came out, there was I believe it's called the A380-900, which was going to be a bigger version. So they already have, designs and plans for a bigger version. So do they take that one and make a NEO version of that? Who knows?
Who knows? Who knows? What else do you see on the horizon? Because you mentioned, so of course you see some maybe more environmentally friendly aircraft. Do you see single pilot operations?
Well, I know Airbus is looking at single pilot operations, and here in the U.S., actually, FedEx they have an internal study. It's not really internal, but it is internal. But they've made it publicly known that they're looking at single pilot operations. Also, of course, unions are adamantly against it. But in the long run, who's to say that it can't happen? 20, 30 years down the road, we have so much automation in transportation. And actually, the concept is, it's not that crazy of a concept. Instead of having two pilots on there, let's say you have a long haul flight where you need 3 pilots, so 2 of them flying and 1 relief pilot. The concept would be you'd put 2 there, and 1 can go back and sleep while 1 stays in the cockpit, flies, and then there's basically a ground monitoring system that would assist the pilot or would keep an eye on the pilot that's up front. So it'd be almost like a drone operator on the ground that could assist.
Yeah, of course, I don't like the idea because maybe it's the way it's been always done in my life. Of course, I had 3 at some point. I was already born back then. And I like, it's almost like the dream of flying is to have like the first officer, the captain. I like it. But especially for someone who's involved in technology like I am, like you are, it doesn't seem completely far-fetched, actually, that at some point automation at the speed it's going currently, that at some point there will be something like that. The timeline isn't sure. You just said 30 years, and I tend to agree with you. It could be longer if there's resistance, as it will be. And maybe we'll start with cargo operations because, the perceived risk by the public will be less. And then as soon as cargo operations prove to be very reliable and safe, at some point it might, again, here, and I'm not, because I'm sure that I know that some unions actually listen to these podcasts. Guys, I'm not saying it should happen. I'm saying it's probably a trend of history that will happen at some point.
Definitely. We've lost a navigator, we've lost a flight engineer. Things, as you said, it's nice to have 2 pilots out there. It provides that comfort factor, and I totally understand the safety. Safety is paramount in this industry. Without safety, we're nothing. But the trends of technology and 20, 30 years, who knows what's going to be out there.
Yeah, who knows? And what about these greener aircrafts? What's your take on that?
Well, right now, we got the MAX and the NEO, and those are big jumps from the existing the CEOs and the older 737s. They're like almost 15-20% fuel burn reduction. So those are big jumps. We got this big battle of we need SAF fuels and how we're going to do it, and there's not enough of it in the world, and when we do get this SAF fuel, it's very, very expensive. And then you got one side, you got the government pushing for everything, saying you guys are mandated, you have to start using this fuel. And then they're increasing taxes on carbon, and I don't know. In some ways, I just think we're going about this in the wrong way. Instead of punishing, basically the industry is being punished, and people are being demonized almost for flying, and airlines are being scapegoated. I think the statistic is something of all carbon in the world. Aviation is like 3-4%. It's something very, very small. So obviously we have to do something as an industry, but I think taking the carrot approach by government and helping, whether it's going to the OEMs and, NASA having these programs on coming up with new aircraft designs, and same thing in Europe, coming up with more efficient, newer airplanes. I think that's going to be the greatest leap in savings and carbon that we can do, instead of always trying to punish and increase taxes and demonize people for traveling. In France, they got rid of a bunch of these short-haul routes, and they're talking about it in other nations also, and other countries are instituting higher and higher taxation just for traveling. I think it's let the people travel, but let's try to do it a smarter way instead of punishing them.
Yeah, for instance, here in London, less noisy aircraft. It's not only because the technology allows it to, it's because at some point you have so much trouble because they're flying over the city, and unlucky Heathrow is on the west side of London, which is the wealthier part of London. So obviously they don't want to bother everybody because they're the most powerful, politically, to kind of hinder whatever plan Heathrow, and we'll talk about Heathrow later, whatever plan Heathrow has for expanding or for modernizing. So incentivizing less noisy aircrafts has worked. The same in Germany with Frankfurt, Munich as well. And I always thought price is important if you want to make incentives for the public. The thing I have that where I join you is that it feels like sometimes, and I'm not specialist enough to actually have a full opinion on this, it feels that a lot of the omen of all this is put on the individual. We're saying, you, Hakan, you, Paul, are making a bad decision by traveling, so you need to pay more and more and more and more. It's something that can be seen. Our government does feel like they're doing something. Whereas, as you said, it's not only about the percentage of pollution that comes out of the aviation industry, it's the fact that everything that is behind the scenes that we don't see, whether it's, all the cargo operation, and here including, trains and trucks and etc., we don't want to see how the sausage is made. So it's like the straws. Look, I'm in favor of removing plastic straws. I totally get it. But again, it's pointing out to you, Paul, have been doing a bad mistake by using plastic straws, whereas not trying to hit, maybe the background of the industry that actually makes that happen. So the incentive should be for the industry and not the omen on simply the individual. Even the term carbon footprint, when we say, and again, I'm not against it, but when we say, oh, Paul, again, what's your carbon footprint? It's almost the entire omen of the earth is just on you. Yes, we have to make an effort, but don't tell me that even if I make everything right, I'm going to make a huge dent. It has to be much larger reforms than just, the people. It's a tough one. And by the way, I think I've said it many times on this podcast. Simply the term carbon footprint was invented by a lobby working for BP to basically kind of shift the responsibility over to individuals, right? So it's really like, oh, it's your fault. Again, we should be doing something at an individual level, but I agree with you. It has to also be part of a much bigger incentive for the entire industry, and not only negative but positive. Push for cleaner aircraft, push for these things, and not only trying to punish people.
Right, and I wonder about. There's not a lot of clarity on. We're taxing. In the UK, you got your. What is it, APB or ATD, the ticket taxes, and we got them all over Europe, and we got them in different places. Are these monies really going back to helping aviation, or is it just going to your general budget? That's the thing. If you want to help the aviation industry, fine, let's collect the money from taxes and fees on tickets, but let's pile it back into research and development, or helping subsidize costs of this SAF fuel, or let's actually use it where it's collected.
Yeah. And let's drive it back to today, because here we were talking about the far-fetched future and no new aircraft. At least, again, there are some blueprints, as I fully agree with you, but no announced plans. But when you look at what is happening today, the backlog of aircraft is just insane. I read yesterday, I think, but that number was not from yesterday, that Airbus has a backlog of orders. So we know what orders are. Some will be, transformed, rejected, blah, blah, blah. But of 8,579. So they can sell aircraft forever without actually creating a new one. Do you think that's part of the issue? And more generally, what do you think about these entire supply chain issues that we've been having? Because it's part of the issue since COVID, actually.
Well, in addition to those orders, you got almost 1,000 airplanes basically grounded. I was just reading the GTF issues. I think 600 some odd airplanes as of May were grounded internationally. So you got like all this capacity that's waiting to come online that just hasn't come online. But yeah, some of these orders are staggering, the numbers, and we're looking ahead. If you want to, obviously the number one customer that it's the Delta United show up, they do get or preferential treatment and manage to get an airplane here or there. But if you're some random airline, you're ordering planes 5, 7, 8 years down the road for delivery.
Yeah, 100%. But this is clearly an OEM issue right now. Do you see it in your work?
Oh, definitely I see it. But I think there's a silver lining to this. I think airline CEOs in some ways they might not come out and say it publicly, but I think in some ways they're relieved that they haven't received all these airplanes right now, because already. We're seeing some comments about slides in yield, and traffic is strong, but maybe the revenue's not there as much. Imagine if you had 1,000 additional airplanes chasing customers today in today's marketplace.
Yeah,
it might be not very pretty.
Yeah, and it allows them to keep the fares up. Why not? Just because I said I will mention Tim Clark, so why not? Is, open quote, extremely exasperated, end quote, with Boeing inability to deliver the 777-900. So, what do you see fares changing a bit? Because I mean, it's hard because of course when we talk globally, because it's a global podcast. Oh, I'm very important when I say that. I mean, our listenership is from the US to, of course, a lot the English-speaking country, UK, Australia, New Zealand. But we have listeners in pretty much all of Asia, all of South America, Africa, etc. So, of course, saying prices are coming up or down is a bit useless in general. But even though, what do you see a price? Because it feels that it's been very expensive. I mean, more expensive. Of course, it's been inflation. Of course, it's been these OEM issues. Of course, it's been, maybe too many people wanting to travel. Is there such thing as too many people? But do you see a trend changing? Do you see prices stabilizing or maybe going down?
No, I mean, we've seen a massive, rise in airline tickets, and it's outpaced inflation, at least here in the U.S. Yeah. And I believe IATA has some international reports on it too. So, but what's interesting, just a few weeks ago, I don't recall if it's Agencia or American Express Travel. One of them had a report out, and they compared it was several hundred city pairs that they tracked, and more than 50% of those city pairs, for the first time in quite a few years, the prices actually had decreased year over year.
Oh,
so either there's a little bit of softness out there, or there's more competition, or there's something happening out there. So there has been probably a stabilization of airfares, and obviously clearly a decline in some of the markets that they're tracking.
Okay.
So I mean, for the consumer that might be good. For the airlines, maybe not so much.
Have you seen?
Of course, the other side of the airline problem is, costs have gone up so much, particularly labor, for instance.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
The airlines want to keep key, they want to maintain those, fares that they've enjoyed for the last few years up there. But for the consumer, travel inflation has definitely been felt.
Yeah, I've personally seen that as well, which also has impacted. Now, I don't think I would have traveled more if the prices had been at the same level of 2019, because it's also a life decision not to travel as much as I did before, besides a business just happenstance. But it's true that sometimes, I'm just like browsing, looking, and I'm like, what is this price? And I'm looking quite ahead sometimes, and like, no way, I'm not going to do that out of, like a holiday or something. It feels still quite expensive. But, hopefully you're right. Hopefully there's some softness in the front. I want to add something, because you mentioned United earlier, and we'll talk about United again a bit later. But talking about the duopoly, when I say here duopoly, I'm talking of course, Airbus and Boeing. I don't know if you've seen Kirby, the CEO of United, said that he wanted an end to that duopoly, and then said they should prop up. I don't think they used the term prop up. That's pure paraphrasing and invention on my part. Embraer, and I'm like, I love Embraer. But I somehow don't see Embraer being able to kind of change anything in that. Maybe Comac, of course. Kirby being in the US, he's not being able to use the term Comac because he would be bashed if he were to raise the Chinese there. But really, Embraer? Do you think Embraer could actually make a dent in the market at all?
Well, I mean, if you look at where they came from, I mean, Embraer is, it's kind of probably an incredible success story. They came from,
Fully.
What was it? Was it 12-seater little props, and then they did that 30-seater Brasilia, and they made larger and larger airplanes, and the Embraer 170 and the 190 series, and now the E2. I mean, they've really come up with some market winners. So who knows? I mean, maybe today's not the day, but maybe 5 years, 10 years down the road, they can come up with that 150, 180-seater aircraft.
Oh, they will. Yeah, I think they will. Yeah.
So, and then the other question is, even if they do, though, are they going to be able to deliver at the volume? Because you just mentioned, Airbus has 8,000 backlog of orders. I mean, how much of a dent is, even if Embraer makes 100, 200 airplanes a year?
That's my question.
Of that size category, are they going to really be able to make that big of a dent in the marketplace?
Yeah, that was more my comment. Not about the ability of Embraer to deliver, because I truly believe they will deliver an aircraft that competes with at least the 220, but even the 300s and the 737s. It will come up at some point. However, it's more the scalability of that offering that I'm more in doubt, at least at the beginning. And again, I don't want, because we have quite a lot of people listening from Brazil. Guys, it was not something against Embraer. I'm just saying, the market forces, especially in aviation, being a manufacturer, it's a long game. You cannot just decide to make 1,000 aircraft tomorrow and make it happen. That I don't think he will. Just one comment. What's your view? Because you said that the airlines are happy to keep fares up. What's your view on all the ancillary revenue? Do you see those going? I mean, first of all, it seems that they're creeping everything. Like in any airline. Do you think they will actually try to raise these ones to actually make a little bit more profit?
Well, I mean, I think ancillary revenue has been the basis of the business model for a lot of different airlines. You got the Frontiers, you got the Legions, you got the Wizz Airs, you got the Ryanair. I mean, some of these airlines, they earn almost 50% of their total revenue.
Yeah, I think Wizz Air is 50%.
Yeah. And I know, I mean, here in the U.S., Spirit many years ago, I mean, I remember on one of their earnings calls at that time, I mean, now they've reached their goal, but I remember at one time their CEO had mentioned when they were maybe 20-30% of their income was in ancillary revenue. He says the goal is eventually to be over 50%. So your ticket fare is, the least portion of what you're paying for. I mean, listen, I understand ancillary revenue. I mean, you pay for if you want that whatever seat, fine, pay for it. And speaking about seats, I didn't even realize that you got airlines now like SAS. Did you know that SAS charges for premium cabin seat assignments?
Well, BA does. BA does.
I mean, I just ran across that because I was looking at some travel to, the Nordics and Scandinavia, and I didn't realize even in business class, SS wants to. I mean, you get the seat for free at 30 hours prior when the check-in starts, but they're trying to hawk a business class seat. You're already paying $3,000. They want to hawk it for another $110, $130. The window was $130. The center ones were $110. It's like, man,
yeah, no, BA does that. I mean, unless you're on some tier like I think bronze or silver. BA, you have to pay. You pay business class. So let's say you do London, New York, the most profitable route in the world, and it already costs you, I don't know, £3,000, £4,000, and they say, but because you don't have any status here, you have to pay $150 for seat selection. I'm like, really? This is how you treat your premium customers? I mean, come on, man. I just wanted.
And actually, I heard that wasn't it Emirates? Getting back to your Tim Clark, wasn't it Emirates that said they were considering a light business class fare where you would pay for different things? You pay if you want the lounge, you pay the lounge separately. If you want ground transportation, you pay it separately, so it wouldn't be bundled anymore. So, and that's an interesting concept. But no, I mean, for these low-cost carriers, I mean, these different fares and charges, and I mean, it's in some ways it's turned into a monster on its own, but obviously it's a very, very, very big part of their business models. So I think I feel bad for the consumer too, because it's so hard to compare. I mean, how many websites do you have to search? And I mean, you see somebody, they're charging you, I don't know, £19 to get between two cities in Europe, but then what? you got to spend another 20 minutes or 30 minutes just researching. What are all the additional charges? You want a boarding pass printed at the airport? You got to pay extra for that. You want this? You want that? So,
but that's creeping up in the traditional carrier. Let's call them that way. It's been creeping up. We just mentioned BA and SAS, but it's been creeping up when you have to pay. I mean, of course, they've done these economy light, whatever, the lower end of the economy to kind of push you then to actually pay ancillary. But now it feels like, I don't know how it is in the US, but it feels like I'm flying low cost anywhere anyway. I'm exaggerating the point on purpose, but so what I'm thinking is that if the market is actually softening, like you just mentioned, I mean, you didn't mention it is, but it could be. And if it's actually maybe people wanting to spend less, I mean, it could be many factors. Maybe suddenly the airlines say, okay, in order to keep these fat profits, maybe the only way to do it is actually raise the ancillary revenue. So here, you want to have your luggage in the cabin, which now EasyJet does. I mean, EasyJet is a low cost. EasyJet, I would expect them to do it, even if I don't like it. But like a BA, a Swiss, a United, I don't know, Alaska, if they started doing this, they could actually increase, our fare is fine, but actually increase all the stuff around it and end up in a very similar situation than a Spirit and an EasyJet.
I was looking at, actually, I have a report. It's put out by IdeaWorks. There's a company here in the US called IdeaWorks. Yeah. And on there, I mean, even these major US airlines, I don't have the 2023 results because the report was generated in 2023. But for instance, Delta Airlines generated $7.9 billion in ancillary revenue. United 7.8, American 7.7. Wow. The Ryanair Group $4 billion. Spirit 2.6 billion, EasyJet 2.4 billion. So, and here I think I have a breakdown. It's pretty interesting of what percentage of, for instance, Wizz Air 4% of their income was generated from
there you go.
ancillary revenue as of
almost
2022.
50%. Yeah, that's what I said. Yeah.
And Frontier here in the U.S. is 51%, Allegiant 49%, Ryanair Group only 36%. So maybe Michael O'Leary needs to come up with a few more ideas. And Volaris in Mexico 42%. So I mean, it's a huge it's a huge component of their basic business model.
Yeah. So let's do a jump from we just mentioned low cost, and since we mentioned, I mostly mentioned Emirates. I remember it was probably just after we recorded the last podcast together. So we're talking early 2023. You sent me an email and you called me Mr. Emirates, actually, which I really enjoyed. I talk about these airlines all the time. Qatar, Emirates, Etihad, even recently. They are the most premium airlines in the world. Yes, Singapore is there, and probably JAL and ANA. I know I'm going to make enemies, but I don't think Cathay Pacific still qualifies to be at that level. Maybe, sorry, everyone. Maybe because, I don't know. I'm not sure. Maybe because Alex is not here, so otherwise he will be very angry that I said that. But so you went, let's talk about when you travels. You went to the Middle East. You had asked me, so should I take Emirates? And we had a discussion, but I want to hear from your words what you ended up doing and how was it? Because I think it was pretty interesting.
Yeah, last in May, I ended up having to attend an IATA conference in Abu Dhabi. And of course, to get to Abu Dhabi from Los Angeles, either had to connect somewhere, or the other option was, right, the reason I reached out to you being the consummate Emirates flyer, so I just fly nonstop to Dubai from Los Angeles and then take ground transportation down to Abu Dhabi, which is not that far away. The only thing is the timing of the flight on the return. I'd probably have to come up from Abu Dhabi maybe the night prior and stay one night near the airport in Dubai before returning to Los Angeles. So we talked that thing over. But eventually what I ended up settling on with the company I was going with, we flew Qatar Airways via Doha. Qatar is probably, in my book, the top airline up there, both the ground experience and air
I
experience.
Agree. I was about to say that. Out of the airlines I just mentioned before, for me, Qatar is number one, undisputed, and undisputable. Maybe it'll change, but for now, it's still the best. Yeah.
I mean, from on board, from the Q suites to, the dine on, it's like, basically a restaurant. You dine when you want, how you want. There's the selection of food is huge. The lounges on the ground are amazing in Doha. So I ended up taking their new A350-1000. Well, not that new, but a few years old. It was my first time actually on a 350-1000. So
I love that aircraft. I love
took that aircraft. To Doha. Got into Doha. It's
that's a long flight. Hold on. How long is that flight?
I think it was like 14 and change.
Wow.
But it went well.
Well, of course, in a Q suite.
It could have gone on for a little bit longer. I would have been all right. Got into Doha, and then I think the interesting part is actually in some ways the next leg. At that time, Qatar Airways had just taken delivery of some 737 Maxes.
Oh, wow.
And I ended up on an airplane that was literally 1 week old, had just entered service, got on board. The crew was really excited. Actually, it was the first time the flight attendants, I talked to one of the flight attendants, the first time that all of them had been on that airplane. So we take this super short hop. I mean, I think the flight's maybe blocked at 50 minutes, but flight time is like 25 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. I've done it. Not on a Max, but I've done it. It's super short, right?
Yeah, Doha to Abu Dhabi. But what was the amazing part is this: is the minute we lifted off, I mean, the flight attendants sprung to their feet. They go get their carts, and in business class, they serve a meal. You actually got a meal on a 25-minute flight. I mean, it was like a meze plate, and I was so amazed.
I know, man, it's incredible. Every time I've done, I used to do a lot of these short haul within the Gulf. You're like, what? The flight is literally 25 minutes, and you're serving me. It's insane. I love it.
And we're on approach, and we can see the ground. We're maybe, I don't know, even less than 10,000 feet for sure. And there's at the last minute they're basically cleaning everything up, to get in their jump seats, and we land. But I mean, it was what service. So unfortunately, though, we ended up we parked. This is before the new terminal had opened up at Abu Dhabi, so we arrived at the old terminal.
Yeah.
But while I was at my conference, though. The sponsors, because it was through IATA, the airport authority, they took a lot of us guests out to the airport, and we got a tour of the terminal. So I mean,
the new one. So you saw the new one before all of us normal
Yeah,
people.
we were in the bowels in the bag room,
No
and
way.
everything. That even they took us to like they have a repair shop where they would be fixing all their ground equipment, and it's it's like almost like a hangar. And upstairs,
did you meet Tom Cruise running on the roof, or no? It wasn't.
No, didn't do that. I during the conference got to meet the CEO of Etihad. Though. That was interesting. So, at that time it was the new CEO, so the chap that came over from Top Air Portugal, the Brazilian man. So he got to share some of their new business plans, and I mean, a lot of this we've already seen now. Now it's been 1 year, but basically they're looking to. They culled a lot of their ultra long haul flying, which was losing money. I mean, as he joked, I think part of their business plan, his business plan was not to set the money on fire anymore. So that was his number one goal. But so they culled a lot of these super long haul routes. Then they want to densify the network that they have, and they had mentioned, I think, within I don't know if it was, I think he'd mentioned 4 or 5 hour radius of Abu Dhabi, something like 2 billion people. Yeah. So they wanted to create one of the best networks, high frequency networks. Instead of operating a flight only once a day or twice a day, they want to do 3-4 times a day to a lot of markets within that circle, and create a lot of good connectivity.
Yeah, which makes sense.
They'd still maintain long haul routes, but for instance, in the U.S., he mentioned they'd only focus on the East Coast markets. Yeah. In Asia, they'd still wanted to get back into China and Japan, and they'd still have some stuff to Australia, but they weren't as focused on super long hauls. It'd be basically that 4 or 5 hours.
Yeah, because they used to do these. I mean, a lot of them used to do these almost like vanity routes, going to Auckland. They have nothing against Auckland. They will talk about it later. But it felt like it was almost vanity, and that was probably, these routes were probably not profitable at all. They were great for the headlines because a new route that takes 17 hours direct from the Middle East. But yeah, I think it's, and having flown them recently, as you've heard, because I know you're a listener of this podcast for a long time, so thank you still to be still listening to us after all this time. I flew them to Cambodia. I flew them to actually Bangkok. Yeah, I would clearly consider flying them again and again. Yeah, they're not. We just said Qatar is the number one in the world, but they have more reasonable fares, a great connection network. The new terminal has changed everything because it's super good. They seem to have also a very good flow of. You don't seem to be wasting too much time in the airport on connection. Not that I dislike staying in a lounge for 3 hours, but the lounges are that good, but you know what I mean. So it's I think they're on a good path. There's always been the rumors about one day merging with Emirates. Of course, these have been back and forth. We never knew how serious they were. However, to your point, I think, and they're not the only one in the game, of course, because both Qatar and Emirates vie for that market too. India is next door. India is in that radius you just mentioned, and that's what the fastest growing market in the world, right? So it's just they won this market, right? I'm sure it's one of their.
I think one of the things that came out of the conference was that general region, the Middle East, India region, is growing at basically 10% annually.
There you go,
which is phenomenal. So
yeah, exactly. You had sent me. You remember? You had sent me these documents with their Excel files actually, where showed the number of people who've actually flown during the last year compared to us. Of course, we used to be exceptions, but compared to a traditional Westerner, let's call it that way. I mean, people haven't flown basically, and now they're starting to, and the growth is exponential almost. Hence, maybe that's why Tim Clark wants a 1,500 seater that's going to be an exploding market, India, and also neighboring Pakistan, and of course, that.
No, I mean that's what you're referring to is called travel propensity, and some I don't have it off the top of my head, but fine. In Western nations, the average person might end up flying 2-3 times a year, but some of these developing nations is 0.1, 0.2. So if you can even double it, it's this huge amount of additional travelers. You get them off trains or buses. Yeah, I know. For instance, I mean, not to get away from the Middle East, but in Mexico, one of there's a low cost carrier Volaris there, and their initial business model was basically attract people away from buses, get people away from the inner city buses onto airplanes. And part of their initial sales campaign is they would have people that would go down to the bus station in these regional cities and they would basically sell airline tickets at the bus station. So they'd approach people and, say, instead of catching this bus that's going to take you 8 hours to get to the next town, here's an airplane ticket, almost same price. They'll get you there in 1 hour, 2 hours, whatever the amount was. So that was part of their marketing, is get people out of buses.
That's
and I
very
know
smart.
It's the same thing in Brazil with Gol and
Gol. I was about to mention Gol, exactly. And actually very similarly to some, of course, the Indian market currently, but to markets that are a bit ahead of India in terms of their development of the market. If you look at Southeast Asia, this is exactly what happened. You've seen people actually starting flying various low-cost airlines in the past. AirAsia is the most well-known because it is these markets where they basically oversee the entire continent almost. But that's exactly what happened. People started, saying, "Oh, I'm not going to take a bus for 8 hours." There's this low cost that goes from one city to the other, and it's working. That's the growth. The growth is there, not us. What do you think? Qatar is number one for sure. Again, for me, the attention to detail is unmatched. Again, maybe JAL and ANA for attention to details are there because they're Japanese. But what do you think about these the plans and the new carriers coming up soon from Saudi Arabia? Do you think they will make a dent?
Well, it looks like they're going to be splitting the market up with Saudi. So, it's Riyadh there is going to be taking the capital, and then Saudi is going to be largely moving to Jeddah. So, and in some ways, I don't think they're going to be competing that much because it seems to have, through the government, gentlemanly split the market up. I don't know if it's from some of the marketing and stuff that we heard about it. It seems like it's going to be quite an experience to fly Riyadh Air, with their new uniforms and all that. So I wonder, is
nice.
it going to be more show, or is it really going to be a solid business model in the long run?
They're doing the good moves because I don't know, of course. But when Qatar Airways was launched, this is exactly the kind of things we were hearing as well. You're like, these guys are just for show. And now you're like, okay, well, actually,
that's true. And if the market is indeed growing at 10%, and then travel propensity is increasing in the region, and you got India next door, and you got all these other nations next door that are also developing. The seats are going to be needed. That's for sure. So who's going to be the player to fill those seats? So, and as you know, Saudi Arabia has this huge push for tourism and visa free or visa on arrival, and easy to get in, and so it might a lot of our friends might have not been there right in the last few years, but maybe in 10, 20 years, where are you going on vacation? No, I'm going to Saudi Arabia. Who knows? Yeah.
And they'll probably take a share of Emirates and Qatar and Etihad for that connecting market as well. Probably there. Let's see. I'm curious to try them whenever they start flying. Maybe just to see how it is because it looks pretty cool. But I'm curious to see. There's opportunity in the market for sure. Just one word. If you ever meet the CEO of Etihad again, you transmit him a message. Then I loved everything about them flying. I still prefer Emirates in terms of the tone of the crew, as I said in the episode when I talked about it. But one thing that I really had an issue with, and maybe it's not only them, but I remember it because it happened, is that how these airlines especially, but others like BA, they talk a lot about their lounges. They're very proud of the lounges. Come to our lounge. These are the investment we're doing to our lounge. But in so many airports, they don't have their own lounge, and they rely on a third party. They rely on Plaza Express or whatever, So I'm in Bangkok. I'm connecting, so I didn't go through a check-in agent to talk to them. There's no way to find in which lounge you're going. It doesn't say anything on the app. It doesn't say anything on your mobile ticket. It doesn't say anything on their website because I was like, which lounge am I supposed to go to? So I was like on their website, and I was like, and the only ones they mentioned on their websites are they're of course the ones in Abu Dhabi and then the one in London. And I'm like, so you should put that somewhere in the app for people. And actually, it was really funny because at the gate, how these airlines do sometimes. I'm at the gate, and there's a gentleman that makes a survey about how is your experience with Etihad. It was not me; it was the guy in front of me. And he comes, so how did you enjoy the lounge? And the guy literally answered, I didn't know which lounge to go to. So I was not the only one.
Yeah, it's a shame. I know that's an industry-wide thing. I mean, so many airlines have to contract for lounges and the communication,
Which is fine.
And also your ground handlers. As we've covered, so many airlines, they don't have their own staff and they have ground handlers, and maybe the ground handler is supposed to give you a little card when you check in, and they forget to do that, or they don't mention it to you, so you wander around the airport aimlessly, not knowing where you can go, if you can go anywhere. So no, it's a little customer service thing, but it's well taken.
Yeah, that will allow me to talk a little bit, to ask you a few questions. See, I'm using this podcast to ask questions to the expert in front of me here. Etihad has also introduced, I usually don't do that, a new redemption chart, and now it's a bit of a mixed bag because the cancellation charge is very high. However, what I want to talk about is not the specific redemption chart of Etihad, is how do you see this whole loyalty thing going? As in, we know there's been huge devaluations post-COVID. We had an episode about that, all these, especially in the US, because you're heavily invested in your not your Hakan, but your credit cards and all the and boarding points and the old game around it, which sometimes I'm very envious about because we cannot really do it from here. But the devaluation has happened. How do you see that market continuing? How do you think basically airlines dealing with loyalty? Do you have a view on that?
Well, I mean, I think as we talked about ancillary revenues, loyalty programs have become another pillar for airline revenues. Yeah. So, I mean, some airlines, they make more money off their loyalty programs than they do flying passengers.
Yeah, they're a bank, yeah.
That's right. It ends up being a bank. So, and we've seen shifts. I mean, loyalty programs back in the day was, I think, truly loyalty, that you flew with them 10 times, 20 times, 30 times, 100 times, whatever that number might be. Now it's a spending program. So a lot of them have shifted to, how much do you spend with me? Do you spend $10,000 a year, $20,000 a year, $30,000? Do you have my credit card? Are you using some of my partners? So, I mean, some airlines have gone, all in on that. I mean, American Airlines here in the U.S., I mean, they got their loyalty program is pretty much a spend program. Whatever you spend on your credit cards, you don't even have to fly American Airlines one time. You can just spend it all on partners or credit cards, and you can still reach their top level, loyalty. So, I mean, it's difficult. I think there's such a huge community out there we know a lot of them that basically have been chasing miles and trying to find sweet spots in these programs. But it's getting, I think, harder and harder. Obviously, there's a thrill in trying to capture those sweet spots, and people still do it. But I think for a lot of average travelers, I think that the ability. I mean, my dad, as an example, he knew that if he flew to Europe, he'd get at least from the West Coast, 5,000 miles each way, 10,000 miles, and then plus whatever bonus for the cabin you happen to be in. And so he knew he takes, X amount of trips, and at the end of the day, okay, for 50,000 miles, 60,000 miles, he can get another free ticket in return. Well, now it's so convoluted, it's so complicated. I'm not sure that, I think in some ways they've lost a lot of people. Yeah. But, there's still this huge push of trying to, some airlines, I think, for instance, Delta, in some ways, I think they're clever. I won't say much about the Delta SkyMiles program, but they get people to join their program and to be active with it, because if you want free Wi-Fi on board, you got to be a SkyMiles member. So they make you sign up for SkyMiles to get Wi-Fi, and then they can blitz you with emails or put stuff in front of your face. So I mean, it's just like, I think, any other consumer retail programs, any other consumer retail, I don't know, systems, or I don't know what way you want to call it. It's just, become another huge marketing tool, and obviously a huge pillar for the financial well-being of these airlines. And I know here in the U.S., in Europe, you guys don't have as rich programs with credit cards, for instance, because your interchange fees are much lower. Exactly. Here in the U.S., we have much higher, but there's some talk of discussions going through Congress that maybe you're going to limit interchange fees potentially. And I think that would shake up the airlines, because they might not be able to offer as rich benefits or sign up for a card and get 100,000 points anymore. That's not going to be there, those financial model.
I think that the flip side of what I said earlier, that is much more difficult to play the game, to call it that way, in Europe, is that loyalty means a bit more. I'm not talking here about the airlines. I'm talking about if somebody has travels and has a loyalty to British Airways, to Virgin Atlantic, to Air France, whatever, they will, I mean, of course, the market is also more segmented. You know, you live in Germany, most likely you will fly Lufthansa, right? Will be exceptions. You live in the UK, most likely you fly either BA or Virgin, et cetera, and so on. But also people tend to stick because there's less of a way to suddenly gain a ton of points in another program, for instance, unless you're on board to a credit card. But it's also more difficult, almost near impossible to, get 20 credit cards a year to try to be on many programs. So at the end of the day, loyalty works. Does that mean the airlines actually value that loyalty? It doesn't always feel that way. The one that does, but it's not in Europe, and I know I keep talking about that, is obviously Emirates. And I've talked about that because I've talked about my story having this problem trying to get the miles being used for an upgrade. I bored people to death with that story a few episodes ago. However, the interesting bit is that they actually they value loyalty, because if you are Skywards, that's the name of the program, and you're logged in, you will have a tendency. I mean, just simply, of course, the product is great. So when I go to Dubai, I'm going to go again early next year. The first port of call, I'm going to do Emirates because of prior experience, because I know it's great, because I have some miles. But the miles is not even that. Is that I know that I can get some value out of it. But then because I'm a member, I know as well that I can do these, sometimes cash and miles. So I say, maybe I have not a lot of miles, but I can actually, try to find a way to actually minimize something, maybe get an upgrade. The upgrades vary. So they're very good about that loyalty service. I don't use these new things they have, Skyward Plus, when you pay a subscription I think it's per year or per month, and you get guaranteed some stuff like lounge access, extra points, etc., which apparently is pretty successful. But I know they have realized that it works, that people are engaged with them. Their passengers, the ones that are part of the program, are engaged. And people, it seems, are okay to pay the increased prices. Even though, again, the prices we said earlier in the show, the prices have increased all over the board, and Emirates is particularly expensive. I think people will agree to pay a bit more to stay on Emirates. So it seems that it's loyalty on some airlines is working.
No, definitely, and then the key is engagement. I'll go back to the American Airlines things, because I've seen some of their presentations, and their goal is, they clearly come out and spell, we want to keep customers engaged with the American Advantage program. Everything you do in your life, they don't have that many partners, but their goal was to basically keep you within that family. Use the American Airlines credit card, use all their partners, use this, use that. So keep it engaged. And even if you never fly with American Airlines, they're still getting, a percentage of the transaction cost. So, but no, it's clever. What Emirates is doing is clever. I think there's some airlines out there that are really doing it well. Other ones are, maybe more still kind of a little bit more blunt programs, not as forward-looking, elaborate programs. But, that's okay, too. Sometimes elaborate programs might be too elaborate for a lot of people. So
100%, which is why, again, I like you, because I'm not, because I've maybe never been used to it, I'm not someone who's, when it's too complicated, I'm not exactly like your dad, but I want to be, as in sometimes I'm like, I have all these miles, I should be able to do something simply with them, right? And when it's too complicated, sometimes I just shut my mind off and I say, maybe I'll use them in the future. However, again, Emirates, and I know, sorry guys, but when you look, you see directly how many miles you need for you to go to premium economy, from premium economy to business class, etc. You see all this is written down right in front of you. Everything is clear. So, and I think actually Emirates came out and said it. If you are, again, a member, so you logged in, so you see these type of things, the look to book conversion is very high, because people are like, okay, I get it, so I'm buying. So it works. And I think this is why they don't really push the same way as in the US, besides, again, the interchange fees, etc., because people are just loyal to the product. Even there's, I was complaining about the fact that suddenly, it's more expensive to get, to use miles on Emirates, etc. But and other airlines, by the way, as well, it feels people are okay to do that. It feels that people are still using their miles. So is it because they really want to fly a specific airline, or is it because actually these reward things were underpriced before. And actually, if people are ready to use more miles for the same route than before, it means that maybe the right price is actually more miles and not the price we had before. I don't know.
Well, that's market elasticity. I'm sure there's a science behind that, and they probably looked at it. And so it seems like from what you're saying, that Emirates has done a great job of putting your options very clearly in front of you, and incentivizing you to spend the miles too. So it seems like they've done a really good job with it. And I know you mentioned product, but I mean, come on, don't they have some older products flying out there still? I mean, pretty sad. So
100%, 100%. I mean, they're this huge refurb program. So they're redoing the 380s, and they are introducing the new seats. So the 350 is coming online in the fall. I think it was probably September. Now they pushed it back a little bit. I think so. It's gonna. I think actually the UK will have one, but not London because they need a 380. They will have a new business class, which will be retrofitted in other 777s, and of course introduced in the new 777-9 whenever that comes in. So they will actually, because it's true, some of the product were all, and I said that many times. Qatar a few years ago was like that. It was, of course, the Q Suite is their kind of pinnacle, but some of the not so old products are great, but sometimes you would get like a super old product. You're like, what the hell just happened? Like it's supposed to be Qatar. That doesn't happen anymore, at least from what I'm hearing. So the Emirates is going there as well. So let's talk about something that is not really luxury, Heathrow. So you've passed by Heathrow, remember, because you were texting each other. You passed by Heathrow last summer. How was that experience?
It reminded me not to connect in Heathrow. Listen, London Heathrow, you guys are so well connected to the world. I mean, it should be the fantastic, incredible airport. You can get from almost any point to any point. It's such a global city. But man, connecting even in the same terminal can be a challenge. So this was on a trip to Scandinavia, to Sweden. So I came in on United out of Los Angeles, Terminal 2, connecting to SAS out of Terminal 2 at Heathrow. And we park at, I don't know what the name of those gates that are kind of away from the main terminal. Okay, the B gates.
B gates.
So we get down, so we have to leave the B gates, long walk. As I remember, the escalators or whatever weren't working. I don't know if it was too early or what the thing was, but so we ended up having to walk much of it. So then we get up to the main terminal area, and you got to go through a passport check just to make sure that you're connecting to the right. You have a boarding pass, basically.
Yep.
Boarding pass check so you can connect, and everything was stopped. And there's two folks there, and they weren't letting anybody in. And they said, our computers are down. We can't verify the boarding passes. Hold on. We're restarting. We're rechecking our computers. So, and this, to reboot their computers, I mean, literally, when I got there, it was maybe like 50, 60 people in line. By the time they figured everything out, I mean, it must have been close to several hundred, maybe, even close to, several plane loads of people just waiting in line there. So finally, these, two ladies, they got their computers up, so they get us through, and then you got to go through security. And then you come into the main and security at Heathrow, take all your liquids out, that technology is not there. I think this summer you guys were supposed to have those new machines, but they further delayed.
Yeah, delayed. There's a few machines if you're lucky, the new ones, but and actually I went through. That's the only thing I'm going to say about one of the recent travels. I know where they are in some of the terminals at Heathrow. So especially, I try to route my security to them, and I go there. I said. There was a big sign that said, okay, these are the new machines, but you still have to take your liquids out. I'm like, what's the point?
Anyway, so basically, then we get back, and then, we look at where our gate is, and then, figure out which lounge we're going to go to. So by the time we got off the airplane and got into the lounge and sat down, it was about 1 hour and 10 minutes. It shouldn't take you 1 hour, 10 minutes to deplane and, walk around the terminal. And we had to backtrack this, all this hallway back to the B gates.
Oh, so you were back to the B gate. Oh my God, yes. That makes no sense, man.
So, you're backtracking all this way, and the escalators, in the B gates are, I think, only going one direction. So there's I think there's only inbound, not outbound. So the outbound, you're like walking, or vice versa. It was one of the two wasn't working. So it's like, oh man. So it should take 1 hour, 10 minutes just to a simple, connection from getting off the airplane. Then we sit at the lounge. Of course, there's a lot of time in the lounge, and then okay, let's walk up to the gate. So, and it's just. I mean, you don't like Frankfurt. I don't really like Frankfurt. There's a lot of airports we don't like, but Heathrow should be much, much better. But it just looks disheveled. The terminals Terminal 2 looks okay. I guess, but the year prior I was in Terminal 3 and that terminal. It's seen many, many decades, and with the low ceilings.
That's horrible. Man.
It's just not very welcoming at all, and it's functional, but it's not very functional. It works, but it's like cobbled together, unfortunately, for a global airport. It's embarrassing.
It's embarrassing. I agree. It's okay. Let me quote once more Tim Clark, because it's the thing of this show. He called Terminal 3, because that's where Emirates actually departs inland. He called Terminal 3 like an utilitarian structure post Second World War.
Yeah,
it was pretty much that. It's when you see, and I said it in past episodes, when you see the investment that Charles de Gaulle is doing, and many people dislike Charles de Gaulle, but the Terminal 2, I've been through it, and it's been improved vastly. It's still a big one. It's still sometimes complicated because of maybe the layout, but it's vastly improved. Frankfurt is investing a lot of money. They'll have their new terminal opening on the other side of the runways. Amsterdam has been investing in the past. It seems that Heathrow is stuck in time. Nothing is being invested. Of course, we opened that new Terminal 2, like the one we just mentioned, which was like more than 10 years ago now, and that's it. And nothing has happened. Nothing. They just announced. They just announced. When I say they, Heathrow just announced that they finally signed. My God. It's been open more than 10 years, so they finally signed an agreement with a company that's going to deal with luggage management for Terminal 2. So they will actually build a luggage system within Terminal 2. So for all these years, it didn't exist. Where was the luggage management of Terminal 2 all these years? In the old Terminal 1, which is why it's not been knocked down. So if you have an AirTag...
Oh my God.
Exactly. If you have an AirTag, which I do, like an Apple AirTag, or any of the other brands that do that, and you check your luggage in, whilst you're in the lounge, you can see your luggage is actually sitting in Terminal 1, which is closed for more than 10 years now. It's there because that's the only way to deal with luggage. And now, because they're finally going to build, and I don't even know how long it's going to take to build such a machinery wherever near Terminal 2, but they will finally be able to knock. And I say they will finally be able. They haven't announced they will. But it's just no. I don't get it. It's one of the most expensive airports in the world in terms of landing fees. You have all these taxes you mentioned before, and nothing is happening. I just don't get it. So I agree with Tim Clark here, and all the terminals are getting super dire. So yeah, I think the reason I dislike more Frankfurt is because I transfer there, whereas Heathrow never happens to me. So of course I don't see that part of it. So, but yeah, I don't. Yeah, man. The one good thing about BA though, that's going to be in Heathrow as well, is that they've announced a co-chair with JetBlue, which was interesting. So we'll see. We'll be able to maybe get some Avios or whatever. It's going to be an extensive co-chair. You told me that I hadn't realized. He's in LA and he's telling me that JetBlue was interrupting its service in Gatwick.
Yeah, I think they're just going to continue it seasonally, so it's going to become a seasonal route. You flew out of Gatwick, correct, when you came over?
Yeah, I flew out of Gatwick. Just Gatwick is, first of all, because of what I just said, Gatwick is not, premium, as in it doesn't look, something. It's just an airport. But everything is automated. You get in, everything is fast, security is fast. It just works. That's what I need. I don't need a fancy chandelier in a lounge if nothing else works. So yeah, I fly out of Gatwick if I can avoid Heathrow. To be frank, since one of the things you mentioned at the top of the show in your resume and your CV, you work in the tech part of the industry. Since I just mentioned BA just. I don't know if you've heard about it. You know how BA, like all the other airlines, he uses GDSs. I think it was Amadeus is the one that BA uses. But BA, because BA wanted to be fancy BA, they created a custom thing on top of Amadeus to make it look like much easier. They called it Fly. And I get the intention. The intention was for their employees to have an easier interface to deal with than the traditional Amadeus interface. And they spent billions on it. It never worked. That's the reason many times the IT would actually shut down. They finally announced that they're getting rid of it. So it never worked. They spent all these billions, and now because I think there's a new CEO, they're just getting rid of it. They're going to go back to pure Amadeus. I think Amadeus has anyway revamped the interface. I mean, at least iterated an interface, their own interface. So they're going to have to teach their employees to use actually Amadeus and not whatever they created. And to talking about that, you are someone who knows a little bit about this stuff that happens in the background. You had sent us a very fascinating email to Alex and me a few months ago about flight planning. So it's quite fascinating to me. So I want to hear you a little about it. The reason I think you mentioned that in an email is that because at some episode, I think probably Alex and I were talking about maybe, was it BA or Virgin? I don't remember. We were talking about that. And you said, oh, here's the reason behind flight planning and how it works and why there's different routings. So go ahead. Tell us a little bit more about that because it's fascinating.
Yeah, I think the background to that was Alex had mentioned he was flying from San Francisco to London, and he was looking at a Virgin flight and a BA flight, and they departed very, very close to each other time-wise, but they took drastically different routings. So he was wondering, why would that ever happen? So, and I think I responded was basically, one, they use different flight planning systems. BA and Virgin, they use different flight planning systems, so they can end up with different results. But a lot of these flight planning systems, we'll get into it now, they look to try to figure out what the lowest cost solution might be between point A and point B. So, and you also got to remember that Virgin and BA, they have very different time-driven cost inputs. You know, their crew costs, their fuel costs, their aircraft engine, airframe maintenance costs, leasing costs, ownership costs, all that might be very, very different. So those cost factors go into their flight planning also. And then there's calculation of overflight fees of different countries they can traverse. So a lot of airlines, what they do is they establish what's called the cost index, which is basically the cost of time versus the cost of fuel. And that goes into the calculation of the flight planning system. And then you got to take into account different aircraft have different performance. So, I don't know, a BA 777 is going to have obviously different performance than Virgin. I don't know, it was either an Airbus or maybe it was a 787 that Alex was looking at. So those airplanes are going to be able to attain maybe different flight level altitudes, faster or slower than another one. Their payload on board, the passenger volume or the cargo on board might be different between the two flights. So that's all going to drive route selection. And then there's an important thing of winds. I mean, the idea is you want to be able to catch the wind, push you along, or if you got headwinds, you want to be able to avoid it. So based on those, that performance of the airplane being able to achieve a certain flight level versus another one, the BA flight or the Virgin flight might be catching very different winds. And then to go even a little bit more detail on that, there's different wind providers that vendors that supply the winds to these flight planning systems. There's national authorities that do it. There's private companies that do it. So it depends what the winds are fed into the flight planner and when these winds were last updated. Was the wind updated only 2 hours ago, or was the wind updated 6 hours ago? So your wind model might be very different. So at the end of the day, when you put all these together, that the routes and the timing and the weight on the airplane and the performance of the airplane might end up with two totally different calculations for these two flights. And then, of course, you get the flight dispatcher after the system creates this optimal route, or the captain that looks at it says, no, I want to avoid this little area because there might be a little bit more turbulence here. So they end up, shaving the route in one direction, go a little bit more south, go a little bit north, or they cap flight level. So, I mean, there's like endless little variables that might mean where two airplanes that take off almost at the same time end up flying on two different routes. And in the old days, there were very few airways out there, and planes didn't fly directly. So basically, let's say between 2 points, there might be only one airway, so you'd have to fly that same airway going or the same airway coming back. Well, now with newer flight planning technologies, and there's a little liberalization of the sky, I guess, and more freedom to navigate and create different routes. Airlines are able to operate more direct routing. So that obviously ends up, helping save the environment and, benefits the operator also by reducing cost. Then we got issues like in Europe, it's another tangent. I don't know if you know, but about 25 years ago in Europe, they came up with something they called single sky.
Yeah. Of course.
Because, in Europe, you got so many different ATC authorities. And the idea was, instead of having, 20 or 30 different ATC authorities, everybody managing their one little parcel of airspace, let's, create a single sky. In the United States is basically that thing. You got the FAA that, covers the entire U.S. So there's a lot more freedom to navigate. But in Europe, it's much more complicated because you got to enter from one end, enter one country at one point and exit another one. And
tiny countries
there's only
as
certain
well.
airways you can fly and certain flight levels you can fly. So, I mean, it's a very, very complicated game, the flight planning system. And then, there's, as I said, overflight fees. Different countries charge overflight fees. Canada charges one fee. Every nation as you go along between, I think the flight that he was talking was from San Francisco to London. So, there's a lot of variables in there.
Even you just mentioned that single sky. It doesn't really happen. It's kind of
no, they've been talking about it for 25 years, and I think the last thing I saw is instead of basically, it's not really going to be single sky. They came up with a concept a few years back. I think it's going to be 7 zones. They're breaking Europe up from the Mediterranean up to the Nordics. But I believe it's 6 or 7 zones. But even implementing that's going to still another probably 25 years.
It's exactly what you said earlier about the resistance of having a single pilot operation by U.S. unions. I think the same. It's national preference, of course. Each government is very kind of territorial about this is mine and it has to be mine. But also there's unions. I remember clearly. There was, at the very beginning of that Single Sky initiative, one of the major points for the Central Europe should have been in Geneva, where I'm from, where I was born. And it had to onboard, there was a plan to onboard like French ATC or part French ATC. But the thing is, the right to strike and labor laws in general in Switzerland are closer to what you have in the US than what you have in France or Germany. I'm not saying there's no protection for people, but obviously all the French ATC, the union said, no, wait, we're not going to go to Switzerland to have our rights, hard-won rights, they go on strike for this. We're not going to have them reduced by moving to Switzerland. So meaning there's a lot of that involved here. Of course, I took an extreme example because, again, the labor laws between Switzerland and France are very, very, very high. But there's that. I think the idea was nice. It's just that each government wants to say, yeah, of course we're going to share, but as long as it's ours.
Yeah, nobody wants to relinquish, their airspace or their control.
Exactly. Exactly. So it's not gonna, I don't see it really. I mean, it's going to be simplified. I think you're right. The multiple zones is going to happen eventually. But I think this is a bit the problem with Europe. And also the charm of Europe is that we have all these tiny countries next to each other. We think we're one continent. I know I talk from Brexit land, but in general, we think ourselves as one continent. And most of the people outside of Europe think of it like I'm going to Europe, but actually that's a part of our charm, I guess. But yeah, for aviation, it's not always great. Are you involved in flight planning at all yourself, or do you?
Well, I used to be a dispatcher, so I got my FAA dispatcher's license. So that's where I picked it up many, many years ago. And I've always been interested in technology. And I do some work for a couple flight planning vendors, and I've assisted them in whether it's the marketing campaign or supporting customers and clients. And, so I've become a subject matter expert for on it.
Is it like since you're on the OEM, so the software side of it, is it something that are these programs, because you mentioned what has evolved in terms of back in the day, we used to do it differently because it was much simpler, but is the software itself, is it becoming way more, I don't know, accurate, or you can feed way more data and find even more precise routing, etc., more like maybe very live data? You just mentioned the weather. Of course, it depends on your provider, but overall, do you see a trend going like super precise, up to the minute routing?
Oh, definitely. I mean, back in the day, we're talking about the 60s when this, used to be the old mainframe computers, and there wasn't a lot of options to, the system would spit out something, but it wasn't necessarily, the most optimal because it couldn't calculate it. Then, now they went into what they call 3D flight planning. So you're able to, look at both how, lateral and up and down and different directions, and you can calculate. Now they have 4D flight planning. So, the technology is going out there. So, as computing moves forward, of course, a lot of these systems too, you're always playing catch up because what's on the market today is still, something that's been developed 10, 15, maybe 20 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's still until you develop something, a new system, it's a big investment by these vendors. And you also got it, basically, you got to get it certified, make sure that it's accurate.
But it's a win as well for if you're an airline that tries to outcompete or maybe on the small margins, having a very latest technology, maybe if you're an upstart airline, can actually help because you can actually...
definitely. You could save, a top-of-the-line flight planning system versus, something more, not rudimentary, but maybe, a little bit older generation systems. You can probably, generate at least 1 to maybe 3% of savings.
There you go.
And that adds up.
Yeah, that's up.
When you get very, very small margins on the airline, so any savings you can generate anywhere, it goes to your bottom line.
Yeah, absolutely. One way to go from, since we live across the world from each other, one way to go from the US to Europe and opposite is to go through Iceland. You didn't come to Europe through Iceland, but you went to Iceland, actually. Was it your first time?
Just a couple months ago, I attended an event up in Iceland, and there's not too many options to get from the U.S. to Iceland, unless if you want to fly Iceland Air, or the other option was kind of backtrack to Europe and then go all the way to Europe from the West Coast and then go up. I know some of the U.S. carriers, United has seasonal service, but it wasn't operating. I believe Delta has service too, but I wanted to avoid the East Coast, any potential weather issues.
How did you go then? What was your final choice?
I flew Iceland Air via Portland, Oregon. So
PDX.
Los Angeles, PDX. Yes.
How is before you go? How is that airport? I've never been.
It's probably a medium-sized airport. It was pretty convenient. Basically. I don't know how many terminals there were, but everything seemed to be under one roof. I didn't have to go outside or anything like that.
Nice.
So I basically took Alaska Airlines, and Alaska Airlines, they seem to have a loose partnership with Icelandair. Alaska, they partner with some foreign airlines, so even the Icelandair flights listed on their websites.
Yep.
So I flew Alaska Airlines 737 up to Portland, and then connected to Icelandair. It was an older 757, but the inside was in good shape. Their business class they call Saga class. It's not much different than a domestic first class in the U.S., but it's a couple more inches. So it's 2 by 2.
2 by 2. So it's better than European business class, which is a joke.
Oh yeah. So it's a 2 by 2, and the meals were better. You got fresh salmon and kind of like that Nordic fare, and it wasn't that long of a flight. It's only 7.5 hours because Iceland is so far north. So no, it was a destination I always wanted to go to. Got in, I think it was like 5:30, 6 in the morning, and the airport was buzzing already because you had the morning wave of all these U.S. flights to come in.
Yep.
And they all connect onto Europe, so a lot of passengers were connecting. The airport's pretty small. It seems like it's basically, I think, one pier with maybe, I don't know, a dozen gates.
Yeah, I've been there. Exactly. That's how it is. Not very big. Yeah.
And there's some remote stands. And immigration wasn't too long. Got into the city. It's a bit of a ride. I think it was almost 45 minutes.
An hour. Is. Yeah, because actually it's not in Reykjavik. It's Keflavik. It's 50 minutes or something. Exactly. Yeah.
So I did the conference there, and on the way back, pretty much same routing via Portland. Got to the airports, as we said, it's pretty small, so it's not the most exciting. But the lounge, Icelandair has a lounge there. It was pretty nice. It was it was interesting. The lounge design was more the Scandinavian, the hardwood design, but then they also have rock features like volcanic rocks on the walls, to homage to their landscape.
I like it though. I like when the airport kind of goes hard on their, surroundings, tradition, culture, whatever. It's nice.
Yeah, so it had a nice view of the ramp, and it's the same thing. It was a 757 going back, and this was a day flight, so I didn't mind that. The iPad, and they do have in-flight entertainment. They do have Wi-Fi. I never used it though, but I had my own iPad, and I was content. So, and just looking at fares, you can go via Europe on BA and different airlines, and Icelandair fare. My client was paying, but the Icelandair fare was not a quarter, but at least, maybe about half of what anybody else was charging. So, even though they're business class, they're kind of like the low cost business class offering. So
but it's nice to have the option. It's like, honestly, I've never been to the US via Iceland. I've only been to Iceland to visit it, and it was Iceland Air as well. But it's like when JetBlue. Now it's not the case anymore. When JetBlue launched here, and one of the reasons I flew them is because they were cheaper than the competition. And of course, their business class is very good though. Of course, it's a single layer. It's not a wide body. It's a narrow body, the 321. But it's nice to have options. So, and like you said, clients can be very price sensitive these days, so you cannot just charge them like crazy amounts. So it's a nice airport, and we don't get to fly 75s a lot anymore, so it's kind of nice to be in one.
Oh yeah, I mean you can feel the power in those. I mean I used to fly those a lot domestically in the U.S., but the 757s, it's got a soft spot in my heart. So it's a good airplane, and I think a lot of airlines. I mean Airbus has come up with the 321, the XLR and all that, but I think a lot of airlines would have wished that actually Boeing would have kept the 75 around and maybe done a re-engine of that, or some derivative.
Yeah, or we mentioned earlier, both of us, they don't have new plans. Of course, it's the nice projects of hydrogen planes and whatever, but a successor to the 75 is, their market is being eaten by the 321. They have nothing. They have other problems, Boeing, to focus on right now, but it's anyway. Talking about from a very small to a very big airport, you told me before we recorded, and of course, you being from Turkey originally, I wanted to hear about it. You finally saw the new Istanbul, the massive new Istanbul. But the story from how you went there is also interesting. And of course, you flew Turkish, which I like more and more, as I keep saying, is an airline. I just mentioned the Middle East. Of course, not exactly Middle Eastern in a way, but Turkish is getting up there with the Emirates and the Etihad and Qatar, right? They still have this kind of, you don't know in which product you're going to end. My story going to Pakistan was one example when I had a seat from 45 years ago. But their new products, they keep improving. The customer service, which for me was lacking for years, is getting... We discussed long about that in the previous episode you appeared on, so maybe we don't have to. But Turkish is a great airline, and I think that's how you flew to Istanbul.
That's correct. I never made it to the airport because it opened during the pandemic, so I was pretty much grounded, as you know, in the pandemic. And finally, last fall, I had the opportunity. My family was going to go, so I tagged along with my dad for about a week over there, and we flew the nonstop out of Los Angeles. So it was a 777. That's a long it still had it still had the older product, the 232 seats in business class. I love those too, because it was me and my dad seated together. There's so much leg room,
right?
And,
exactly. Sorry, when I want to be clear. You've heard the episode, but I want to be clear for those who might not have heard. When I talk about the very old product, I ended up in an older version of a more maybe regional business class type of. I was in a 777-200 from Istanbul to, was it Karachi? I forgot, Karachi probably. Anyway, it doesn't matter. That seat that you just mentioned, the 232, which is open, so it's not, there's no doors or whatever, and it's probably a 15-year-old product, is a great product. I love, especially because I'm tall, you are tall. There's so much leg room. It's very easy to walk over the other, even if the passenger is not your dad next door, it's okay. I love that product. I always loved it. Sorry, I interrupted you, but yeah, I love it.
No. It's a super solid product still. In my book, sure, those you got the more fancy, Qatar Q suites and all those are wonderful too. But this product, and actually, I think if you're traveling with somebody, it's probably a wonderful product.
I agree.
Of course, the food is still good on Turkish. You got the the chef on board for Doe & Co. chef. Yes. They're catering the in-flight, the IFE, tons of movies and video.
That's great. The IFE is as well. The UI is great as well. It's super swift. And I love it. No, I'm saying I'm sorry to you and to Turkey. I should mention them more often in the same breath as Emirates, Qatar, and Etihad, because they're close to that now. Yeah.
And one thing my dad really enjoyed, he didn't realize it, but they're one of the airlines that had the camera in the front and the back. So he enjoyed playing with that as they're coming in for landing and taking off, looking at the underneath camera and then the camera from above and all that. Cool. So that was neat. Wow. So no, I had a great trip. We landed in Istanbul, get in there in the late afternoon. But you're right. I mean, boy, that terminal is big. I don't even recall what our gate number was, but it was really, really far away to get to immigration. Yeah, so I noticed, I don't know if it's been a recent ad, but I've heard some comments from other folks too. They have a lot of buggies golf carts now, larger golf carts that can carry like eight passengers. So there's a bunch of those waiting at our gate, and they saw my dad is still getting up there in age.
Actually, you have even because you use a buggy, but if you walk, you have even stickers on where you walk to indicate that's a pathway for these buggies, to pay attention that there's a buggy. Of course, they will honk or whatever, but yeah, they were there since the start. But now there's the last time when I was, just a few months ago, there was way more. I think they realized that, especially if you're maybe like your father, someone who's more elderly, you cannot ask them to walk these long corridors forever.
Yeah. So, we got one of those rides and it delivers you right down into the immigration lines, basically, just a few yards from the immigration lines. So, that was super helpful. And then you get out and, the airport is massive. One of the highlights is when I was over there, it's because obviously I have a lot of contacts at Turkish Airlines. I was able to come out and play airport with them basically for one day. So I got a tour of they have a purpose-built building that's basically their crew center, which is away from the terminal, where the crew all show up and they check in, and from there they do their briefings, get their paperwork, they get their flight planning. And then they're driven out on the ramp to airplanes. So got a tour of that. Got a tour of they have a new cargo facility. They still run a bit of a split operations. They still have cargo. They had cargo operations at the older airport at ISL. But they're building up all the new warehousing and everything, so everything can be shifted and concentrated at the new airport. Got a tour of. They're still building a few more hangars, but they have a couple maintenance hangars that are completed. So these giant hangars with a bunch of airplanes tucked inside. So
nice.
With the gleaming clean floors. Then got a tour on the driven across the ramp a little bit.
No way.
Went into the bowels of the terminal, got to see, the baggage system and, the miles and miles of conveyor belts and automated.
That must be crazy, by the way.
Yeah, wow, machinery. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Wow.
And I learned they have what's neat is they have a whole control room underneath there. And as you walk into this room, it's like 20 people working in there, and they have all these monitors, and all they're doing is just monitoring all the baggage systems. So if, one belt stops, immediately they get on the walkie-talkie and notify, they have an army of people like repairmen that go out there, and is there a jam, something, blocking it to move it and all that. So
that's amazing.
So the baggage system itself is just a whole world on its own down there.
They should teach that to Terminal 2 here at Heathrow. No, but it's amazing. That airport is, people can argue about the design, whether they like a design, but that's all airports in the world. But in terms of what type of airport, not only Turkish deserve, but also Istanbul as a huge city deserves. Not that I dislike the older airport, it was practical, was close to the city, but it was so packed. The transfer, especially from international to domestic, was a nightmare. It was like a huge
that place was overflowing. It was nowhere designed to cope with the amount of traffic that was flowing through it. Especially when they designed it. Back that lot that was designed back in the 80s. Turkish Airlines was more of a point-to-point carrier that hadn't become this global connector. So it wasn't really designed for what it ended up having to handle.
Yeah, and so the new airport is just fantastic. And it's just the beginning, because when you look at the master plan, it's like, it feels like there's going to, I think it can go until nearly 200 million passengers a year or something.
Yeah,
that's the future.
Well, right now they're on phase one, basically, of the terminal. Yeah. So I think there's 4 phases of what what they can do, and more runways. They're currently building another runway.
Yeah.
And then we went upstairs and walked around in the terminal, and I forget which brand it was, but it was I don't know if it was Coach or, one of these fashion brands. I guess their number one store for like a few months running at the time had been the one, globally had been the one at Istanbul Airport.
way.
So,
Wow.
I mean, I don't remember if don't take it for gospel. That was Coach, or it was just one of these,
one of these
Louis
brands
Vuitton, Coach, one of these brands, that had been their number one store was the one at the airport,
Wow.
And that's all before, the Chinese tourists have come back. The Chinese aren't traveling it, So I imagine how it will be with getting more passengers through there.
I recently do this from time to time. I'm not going to mention the name. I recently did some work for one of these companies that does these duty-free stores, basically. There's not that many in the world.
Yeah.
And, I cannot, but you can figure which it is. And there were exactly that thing. They were telling me they were seeing increases all over the place, even in places when the Chinese have not come back. And the places when the Chinese have started to come back, the pricing was the volume was exploding. It was like it was really kind of fascinating to see. I mean, we know it; it's almost like a cliche, but to see the numbers was fascinating. But again, that place, that Istanbul, it's a shopping mall. This entire area, where there's all these shops are. It's like, unlike, for instance, Abu Dhabi, which is more subtle. That one is like, so you can see all the stores. So you can almost like walk like in a Westfield, which is one of the brand of these mega malls that we have in the world. Well, because it's like you can do your shopping there, and it's very smart, I think, to do that. I'm not one to shop in airports. I'm talking here about thinking about the customer in general, and not me. I'm not the target, but it's just impressive.
Me either. But I mean, I think airlines love it in many ways because it reduces their costs. I mean, they let the airport operator generate a lot more money from other sources than aeronautical charges. So, of course, that's one of the things in Heathrow. You guys do a lot of shopping there too, but they charge a lot to the airlines. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's one thing I will say. For instance, Terminal 5, there are quality shops, that's for sure. You have your Louis Vuittons, your usual. And that because it's a private airport, there's an incentive for them. In the US, you do all... I can't. In the US, most airports do their money with parking fees, basically. Park your car, that's how we make money. So shopping is not a big thing. In more private airports, I mean, the UK being the more private in Europe, it's how they make money. They have these kind of co-systems where if the shop makes more money, everybody makes more money. So they incentivize these shops to be great for people to buy stuff. But when I compare I'm talking here the layout, the design of how it is on Istanbul or even at Doha, of course, you want to shop. Again, I'm not someone who shops, but I'm like, it's really impressive. And for Turkish, is it still not the airline that has the most destinations in the world or something? I think it is, right?
Yes. That I forget what the number is, but most destinations served globally.
And they will keep increasing. They deserve, not only in terms of branding, but they deserve in terms of what they want to achieve, to have such a port of call, because it's a global airline that I think will keep gaining market share.
And they're waiting on airplanes too. They're waiting on the OEMs.
600 aircraft or something. How many did they order? So that's why I'm saying these old products that I've seen and I've experienced recently. And people say I've been Qatared, I've been Turkish many times in the past. But that occurrence will happen less and less, to the point it will never happen anymore. You'll have only great products, and that's what frequent travelers want. They want an expectation of a product, and I think Turkish is going there. And the quality of the customer care as well has increased massively. You remember, I think we talked about it last time. There was this a feeling for a long time that Turkish was a bit of a civil servant mentality type of a company, whereas now it's a customer centric company. I mean, there's still hiccups. I'm not saying, but all companies have hiccups. Even Emirates has hiccups or whatever. But it's cool. And did you fly the same way back to?
Yep, the same thing. The 777. So. But this time they fly 2 flights a day to Los Angeles. So I don't know, by mistake or for some reason, we picked the morning flight, which I think departs Istanbul 8, 9 in the morning. But with the airport being so far away, it meant a super early start from the city to get out to the airport. And I wanted a little bit extra time to enjoy the lounge. So I talked my dad into going even earlier than normal. So I think he would have preferred to take the afternoon flight. But I don't know if it was a fare difference or what the reason was. But we ended up with the morning
Did you like
flight.
the lounge?
The lounges, I mean, big. They got the different. They got the the area where they make pides and grilled cheese sandwiches, and then you got different areas for different things. You got the little golf experience.
Yes,
You got
piano bar.
the piano bar. It's broken down. One thing I really like is they have lockers when you walk in.
Yes.
So you can get rid of your backpack or your luggage, so you don't have to walk 100%. Around with it, and take up room and, block 100%. Seats with it and stuff like that.
Even the old one, so the one at the previous airport, ICL.
They had it also,
They had it also, yeah. Less, now you could see that they saw that it was something that people requested because they have massive amount of them. I mean, you have them at, for instance, in Doha, in the Qatar lounges, but it's a room, so you have to go, which is fine, by the way. Yeah. But when I went, because I've done that on several occasions, when I wanted sometimes even simply to go see Doha, I just take my backpack. I didn't want to have the rest with me. Just by counting the number of them, you can see it's not something that people use a lot. Whereas in Turkish really thought about, like, you know what, just leave your stuff here, it's fine. Then you can walk into the lounge, enjoy the lounge, have a drink, whatever, food, and then you can, when you leave, you just grab it back. And I think it's great.
No, I wish actually more airlines would have that. Same. Because I hate toting around my roller bag and my backpack and leaning against the chair or the wall, or if I don't have to do it, just drop it off there and then just walk around kind of on your own without being attached to something when you're in the lounge.
Yeah, agreed. So, because we have a few more minutes going, I mean, we don't have a time limit, but I also want to be respectful of your morning, because for you it's a morning, for me it's like almost 8 p.m. There's no more football, so, I don't care, but I mean, for you, you have a day to go to. But you went twice down under, so not with Turkish. I think this time it was, United. I mean, you have a love for United, I don't know why. No, I'm kidding. So... let's do first maybe to Australia, because that's a long flight. How was that? So was it United, right?
I had 2 trips down under. First one, it was the one you're asking about, is to Brisbane. I had to go visit a certain 737 operator that's based down there. It was indeed on United. United last fall started a nonstop from Los Angeles to Brisbane. I think it was 3 or 4 times a week. The flight has done so poorly, it's already been discontinued. And actually, when I came back on the airplane was literally like super empty. And I asked the flight attendants, and I said, "How many people are on board? This flight is so empty." And she says, "Yeah, we have less than 60 people." So,
I was about to say, because I was about to ask you, meaning it's great for you if you're in that aircraft because you have many seats for yourself, right? So it was wow.
Yeah. So, but no, I mean, I know you joke around it, but the reason I'm sometimes someone's attached to United is because here in Los Angeles, there's choices internationally. I'd love to fly other choices too, and I prefer either One World partners or like Qatar or some of the star partners. But for this one, just the timing and the cost and the flight times and everything, the United flight worked out best. So
and you have at least Star Alliance is a great alliance, so you can get your Singapore if you want. I mean, this is impossible to get award seats anyway these days. It was already difficult before, but like you said, Turkish is also Power Star, and it's still up in the air. Maybe one day. I don't want to ask you if the Etihad CEO told you, but Etihad has always been like close to Star Alliance. Maybe one day, since Qatar moved to One World and Emirates will always stay on their own. Maybe, who knows? One day they'll be part of Star, so which is good. So you'll having one of those there. I don't know. Anyway, go on. Sorry, I interrupted your story.
No, I mean, it was actually my first time in Brisbane. I've been to Sydney and Melbourne countless of times, and actually,
I've never been to Brisbane. Like you, I've been to the other two. That's it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't know. I just the city was a little underwhelming. I mean, I think part of it didn't help that it was tropical heat. It was middle of their summer, so you walk off the airplane, your glasses get fogged up. So it was one of those instances. But no, I mean, I just found the city. It wasn't unlike, let's say, Melbourne or Sydney. It's not really a foodie town. It wasn't that touristy. It wasn't a lot of things to see. I mean, I understand people use Brisbane to get away to either the Sunshine Coast or the Gold Coast, the beaches. Yeah. So I mean, that's logical. But at the city itself, I mean, it wasn't the most exciting. But I was in town for about 3 days. Same thing. Flew back out of United. The terminal. I don't know if it was the times that I was there, but the terminal just seems oversized for the level of activity there was. I mean, It was, I think the flight was around noon, departure around noon. So maybe it was a quiet time. Maybe they were much busier in the evenings. I don't know. But the airport seemed dated from the 1980s, and it was kind of, from the carpeting, and it's kind of like the tiles on the wall, and that's the impression I got.
Oh well.
But I mean, it was pleasant enough. I mean, it was since it was not very crowded. I mean, it was super easy to get in and get out. I don't even remember they used some. Oh, it was the Air New Zealand lounge the contract lounge that United uses. And
there you go. That's Air New Zealand is another Star Line. See.
Yeah. So and they got. I actually like the Air New Zealand lounge concept from the design and the lighting and the furniture, and they have some decent lounges. And another trip that I took was we can get onto in a few minutes. Maybe it was Auckland, New Zealand. So
that's the one I want to hear about exactly. But you finish your Brisbane story, because that's the one I want to hear about, of course.
Yeah. So I mean, no, the time in Brisbane was good. It was sweltering. The one thing I will say about Brisbane for anybody that goes there, I guess through the downtown area, there's I don't even know what the name of it is, but it's basically a river snakes through the downtown. So I was able to spend about an hour walking up and down that, and there's eateries and entertainment spots and stuff like that. So I think that's probably the happening place to be in Brisbane.
Yeah, we'll visit one day. I need to visit one day. No business ever. I don't have a relationship with a 737 operator, so, but I wish to see it one day. Yeah, I need to. But the airport was okay. It's more the city they didn't connect with.
The airport okay. I mean, it was functional. It wasn't that crowded. As I said, it was looked a little bit dated. Maybe if I were there at a different time of the day, maybe it'd be overflowing.
Yeah.
So I mean, I know the airports in Sydney and Melbourne, they can overflow, and they're older airports, and there's only so much space and hard to expand. But Brisbane seemed fine from an airport point of view. As you said, we don't need the chandelier as long as it's functional, and security was decent and fast, and that's what matters.
Yeah, it's true. It's weird because sometimes, and then we'll go to that to Auckland. It's weird because, of course, we just mentioned Heathrow, etc. I judge airports sometimes more often on the fact that I transfer there than actually I land or depart from. Of course, if you have a very bad wait at immigration on the way into a country, or wait at security on the way into the airport and airside, I will judge it harshly. But it's true that I expect more from a connecting airport like, we just mentioned Istanbul or Doha or Abu Dhabi or Dubai or, I don't know, Hong Kong, that I expect on the way out. I just want to get out, basically. And the way in, I would just want it to be as easy as possible. Of course, if it's a great lounge, I'm happy. But it's not the same requirement. For me, the layover, hence the name of this show, man. The layover is maybe where I'm more judgy. Hence my judgment sometimes on Frankfurt and etc. It's because as layover airports, this is where it matters to me. Anyway, that was a quick parenthesis. Don't fight, because probably that's going to be the name of the airport of the day, because we discussed about many airports. I could have done PDX. I don't think we ever done it, but because it's Auckland, I've never been to New Zealand. I've never traveled with Air New Zealand either. I don't know if you've done that, but that's for me the most. I would preempt this by saying one thing. The reason I've never been to New Zealand, besides the fact that I didn't have the opportunity, even when I was living for a bit in Australia, long time ago, I was young, is because everybody keeps telling me that New Zealand is like Switzerland. I was born in Switzerland, so it's the most. I want something different. I want a desert of the Gulf or the Yosemite. I want the mountains of Peru. But when people tell me, Paul, you need to go because it's like Switzerland, I'm like, you're telling me to go back to my own country. So maybe that's why I know it's unfair what I'm saying. But I want to have your opinion, of course, on Auckland, but especially the airport, and I want to know how you got there.
Well, on the city itself, actually, I will say it is kind of like Switzerland. It actually reminded me of Scandinavia. I'll say Scandinavia more.
Okay.
It's very naturey. It's clean. It's organized. The city's very manageable, and it's kind of expensive. So you do feel like you're either in Switzerland or Scandinavia. But it's a high quality of life. So you can sense that from being there.
Yeah.
As far as the airport, let's start with how I got there. It was Air New Zealand is partners with United as we mentioned, so it was a mixed itinerary. So actually, I took United down to Auckland. It was a 787.
Nice.
And I don't know if they're short of gates or because maybe the airplane sits, the United airplane gets in early in the morning and sits there most of the day. So I don't know, because it has a long layover. We ended up parking on a remote stand.
Oh.
And I mean, I guess background on the airport, it has two terminals. It has an international terminal and it has a domestic terminal and an international terminal. And the international terminal looks like one end has a rotunda, which looks like it was the original wing. Yeah. And then they built a new pier, I guess, in the 2000s, sometimes in the 2000s, for that can accommodate A380s. So the larger airplanes go over there. So I don't know if it was just time of day or because the aircraft sits a long time. So we ended up arriving at a remote stand, got bussed in. They pretty much dump you very, very close to where the immigration and customs is. Being early in the morning, lots of arrivals from different points in the U.S., and I believe there was some arrivals from China also. It was China Eastern. Somebody had an A330 there, I recall. Mm-hmm. So customs and immigration was it was pretty busy, but got through. I mean, the building itself is, I guess customs and immigration is in this original part of the building where the rotunda is. Mm-hmm. So it looks a little bit dated, but got in, got out. It wasn't too bad. One thing that I found out, which I kind of knew, but I'd forgotten because I'd been there for a few years, to catch some ground transportation, you have to go outside, and then you walk basically in an uncovered area to like Uber pickups are, and of course it was drizzling and raining that morning, so you get soaked on the way. But at least when you get there, there's a little shelter area where everybody was huddled into waiting for their cars. So we can do the flights on the return. I did take Air New Zealand. I don't know if you know about their premium cabins. Their premium business class seats are very, very similar to what Virgin used to have. Yeah, it's those herringbone seats where your feet kind of dangle in the aisle. Not my favorite, being tall, but it was okay. But I mean, the Air New Zealand product still, minus the seat, which I'm not a fan of. I mean, the product overall, from the crew to the food, I mean, I'd say it was good. I mean, they're friendly, they're attentive. The IFE was okay. It was. I mean, I wouldn't classify them as top carrier like Qatar, but they're certainly way above the average. And while I was in New Zealand, I found out I had to do a little work for a certain carrier down there, and I realized that being the end of the world for them, the only reason that they're able to be as big as they are, or to have as big of a footprint as they have, is basically 1 in 3 customers on board Air New Zealand is an Australian or a traffic that's to or from Australia. Oh, wow. So that's really their bread and butter, bringing in people, connecting onwards to these cities in Australia, or there's so much traffic between Australia and New Zealand, obviously.
Yeah. Wow.
So that's one issue. And then I also learned that a little bit of a problem for them is New Zealand itself is not per se that premium of a market. It might be a more leisure premium market, but it's not a corporate market. So that's another reason why they got to rely on Australia for feed. So and over time, I guess they have to play on their when they're marketing, that they got punch above their weight, basically. Yeah. And the way they're able to do that is with all this clever marketing, whether it's their ad campaigns, their safety safety briefings and videos, and so I mean they try to be very innovative. I mean, they're a small company, but they definitely punch above their weight on a global scale. So.
Yeah, I had interacted. Sorry to interrupt. I had interacted with, I forgot now, head of loyalty. Doesn't matter. Anyway, it was a long time ago, and it was fascinating because I some of the stuff that you just said, I remember I have echoes from the discussions I had. I was not a direct, as in I didn't work directly for Air New Zealand, but it was part of a group aviation. I cannot say more than that, and like over coffee, because it was just interesting. It's one of these airlines for me that I rarely see. I mean, I see the aircrafts sometimes, especially when they used to have that route London, LA, Auckland, which is fantastic. When you see an Air New Zealand aircraft all black here in London. But my limited interaction meant that I wanted when I was over coffee, I wanted to talk to them, and it's exactly a bit what they said. And they're very good at marketing. They're very. I mean, even like, okay, maybe I live in the UK, and the UK has some ties with New Zealand, but the fact that I hear about Air New Zealand here is already quite something. I don't hear about, I don't know, AirAsia, and they're not in the same category, but you know what I mean. There's some airlines in the world that, even though I can see them on the ground at Heathrow because we have pretty much everything, I don't really hear about. Whereas Air New Zealand has managed to cut through the noise.
Yeah, I mean, their branding is basically their culture, so they try to play that up, definitely.
Yeah.
Another little tidbit that I learned was, I mean, I don't know how much of a thing this is, but they say they like to call themselves at Auckland Airport the busiest airport in Oceania. So, and I guess they're a single runway, just kind of how like Gatwick is.
Yeah.
So that's what they consider themselves, the busiest airport. But then when you really look at the passenger counts, I guess the passenger counts is something like 17, 18 million a year, which is not much more than a Luton or a Geneva or maybe in the United States, St. Louis or Portland. So it's not a massive airport by any means, but it's air transportation is a lifeline in New Zealand because it's not going to be replaced by trains or boats because you got islands and you got mountains, and so air transportation is a lifeline to get around.
So would you fly again Air New Zealand if given the chance?
Yeah, definitely fly them again. I think I look forward to them getting a new premium product. Not the biggest fans of that seat, but no.
It's true. I've never flown them, but I've flown Virgin. That seat is, and there was another airline. Was it somewhere in Asia? I've flown.
Cathay used to have that seat too.
Yeah,
Cathay Pacific.
There was another one because I remember I had a sweet. No, it's probably. You know what? It's probably Etihad. You remember they had a partnership with Jet Airways?
Oh, yes.
And I'm pretty sure that Jet Airways had hands-me-downs from maybe Virgin. Maybe I'm getting the story wrong, but I remember being in the Etihad, entering the aircraft, and like, what is this? We're talking like a long time ago, not now. Now the seats are pretty much all the same, etc. But we're talking a long time ago. And I was like, what is this? And the livery was clearly Jet Airways. It's probably had an aircraft change or something, and there was, and those seats are really not for tall people like us. Like you said, our feet are like it's very weird, right?
Well, I was actually worried when I was sleeping that like if I slide down too long, are my feet going to hang out in the aisle, and the flight attendants, I'm going to trip somebody, or I'm going to get whacked by a cart going down the aisle, or.
Yeah, it's true though. It is exactly. It is. For the record, we're basically the same height, Hakan and me. So, and I keep.
I think you got an inch or two on me, though.
Yeah, okay, fine. But I mean, it's like we're tall people, and so meaning these type of details matter to us because there's, and then we'll wrap up. But there's sometimes when I read reviews online, because I'm like you, we like our geekery. Like I want to know about the seat before I get to it. You can feel that most of the reviews actually are made by normal sized people. I'm not saying they're short, but like. Because sometimes I enter a seat and I'm like, this is not that comfortable. But then I realize that I'm on the 95th percentile or some whatever. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't work for me. It's just like, even the Q suite at times, when I'm trying to, when you're sleeping, I try to shift the location of under the TV, that table thing. I sometimes can hit my knees, right? So, which is fine. I'm not criticizing it. I'm just saying that, of course, they don't gotta make seats just for us, right? But
and then the footwells, that's something that drives me crazy. Some footwells are too small.
Oh man,
way too small.
That's actually the reason number one I read reviews, because I'm not a fan of these review sites because they're all about upsetting your credit cards and stuff. But because I want to know about the footwell, and like for instance on Singapore, you remember that old, very large seat that they had in business class, which has now been basically replaced. I think it still exists in some wide bodies, but you had to sleep on a angle, right? But there were a few seats on basically the bulkheads that had so like a small bench for your feet, because of course there was no need to do that angle because there was no one in front of you. So these type of little details when you're tall, you want to know about, because like how can I place my feet without actually hurting? And that's why I read. And coming back to your Turkish flight, this is why that 232 is amazing for people like us, because even if you're full lie flat, and of course there's no door, of course it's up in the open, But your feet never freaking touch the end of it. It's amazing.
That's true. And actually, that's one of my biggest negatives of the United Polaris product, because the footwells are tiny. And unless if you happen to, as you said, you got to find that one, bulkhead, seat way up front, then you'll have a larger footwell. But otherwise, the footwells are tiny. So, and I feel like, I'm in a little cocoon with my legs otherwise.
And when you want to turn, if you're a turner, I don't turn a lot during sleep, whatever, but your feet, because you're told, like, God, the angle, I cannot turn them. They're like locked into that footwell. It's just, I said what was his name? I keep forgetting your name, man, from Germany. He's very tall. He's taller than us. He's probably, 6'6", 6'7".
Oh my!
So he said that we should do once an episode where we talk about the best business seats for tall people. Oh yes, Frank Losel. I should do an episode where I get you, I get him, I get a few other very tall people that I know, and we do like a round table of tall people, and we compare our experiences and say, okay, definitively, what are the best seats for tall people? Because I think we'll get a great service to other tall people in this planet.
There you go. Let's do it. But then we might need one for for shorter folks that are challenged on trying to put their bags in the overhead bins. Which airline has a bins that open up lowest or something?
Lowest, exactly. Or they have these the small step.
Oh yeah, on the seat to stand up on.
Yeah, exactly. Which you can see that. I remember seeing that very often on Cathay. Not that their flight attendants are particularly short, but some of the aircraft, some of these aircraft, the overhead bins are very high.
Yeah, like 777s particular, yeah.
Yeah, and so they keep going there. Yeah, it's, anyway, see, we're never going to run out of content to do this this show. So, look, we're far behind our schedule, so I'm going to let you go. I mean, unless you want to, if there's something specific you want to say before I let you go.
No, I'm good, Paul. Thank you for the invite. We appreciate it. It's always fun. Time flies.
Time flies, and I told you back in the day that I would get you again, and this was a perfect occurrence, because you are about to, because that's the last thing, and then I'm going to play the music while we do that. I'm going to just put it low. There you go. I know that you're leaving soon to Europe. You mentioned it earlier, so I wanted to get you before you go on your summer holidays, even though I don't know if it qualifies as summer. Maybe not. Maybe by then you'll have actual summer in Europe. So do you have any other flights being planned besides that for the future?
Unfortunately not. It goes back to our first discussion of, business travel. But, stuff will tend to pop up. But, I think we have something planned for the family for the fall. But, nothing, no work travel yet. But I think a lot of companies are, take the month of July, August off. So, especially in Europe overseas. So, come September, I'm sure I'll be back doing something. No, I will report back.
In Europe, it's dead. I can see, like England the UK is slightly less European in that way, but I mean, I can see the number of emails that have completely dropped. Now people are on holiday, especially now that we're there. July 15th to August 15th is dead. And I can see it. So I really appreciate you for doing this with me. It's always a great time. I'll probably ask you to come again, maybe in another year and a half, to update us about other news from the industry. So thank you. And again, for those who want to follow you at LA Flyer on X, I think we have to say nowadays. Otherwise, just keep tuning in to Layovers and you'll be back.
Thank you.
Thank you again. And everybody have safe travels. Happy flying.
Happy flying, everyone.
There you go.